Welcome to Gliese Rising, written by Brian Brumbaugh, narrated by John Rhys-Davies. What if our first step into the stars came with a warning? When Earth's leap to faster-than-light travel draws the attention of the Galactic Federation, humanity is told it's not ready, too divided to stand among the stars. Now, visionary explorers and political leaders must unite a fractured planet before rival species claim our place in the cosmos. Gliese Rising is a gripping first contact epic of ambition, unity, and the fight for survival in a galaxy that never forgives weakness. Let's begin. Prologue. The 5-year push. The press called it the day the universe got smaller. In reality, it began in the silence of a hangar the size of a city block, tucked inside SpaceZ's Nevada facility, with one man staring at a silver ring, the height of a 12-story building. Elon Lusk had always imagined the Alcubierre Drive would feel heavier. The equations that made it possible had weighed on him for years, bending his thoughts the way gravity bent light. But the device itself, gleaming alloy, latticework supports, superconductive bands coiled like a serpent, looked almost delicate, a halo against the dark. In 3 hours, the Aurora would ignite that ring and fold space-time for the first time in human history. A jump not to the Moon, or Mars, but to Gliese 667c, 23.5 light-years away. No wormholes, no cryosleep, just warp. The launch was televised in every city on Earth. Billions watched the Aurora vanish in a flash of refracted light, its image distorting into a tunnel of impossible color, and then reappear, 8 minutes later, broadcasting live from the surface of a rocky, crimson world under the light of twin suns. The world had changed before breakfast. The change was swift and merciless. The United States, owner of SpaceZ, the Alcubierre patents, and the warp fleet, tightened its grip on the world economy like a fist. Trade routes, mineral rights, even deep space communications were routed through American-controlled arrays. Every other nation woke up to find themselves buying their future by the gram. But Elon Lusk didn't care about politics. He cared about the colony. Gliese 667c was no Eden. It was a rock with a breathable atmosphere, a gravity that could snap your spine if you tripped wrong, and a crust laced with exotic metals the periodic table had never met. To mine, it meant building an infrastructure from nothing. 5 years blurred into a cycle of launches, construction drones, and orbital haulers. Massive atmospheric refineries rose from the red dust. Supply ships groaned under loads of unprocessed ore. But there was a problem no alloy could fix, people. The work was brutal. Crews burned out in months. The pay wasn't enough. Private contractors couldn't keep up. And so, on a rainy Thursday in Washington, Congress passed the Inmate Workforce Reform Act, a 5-year tour on Gliese 667c for non-violent offenders. Finish it clean, and you walked free. No parole boards. No halfway houses, just the black between the stars and a second chance at the end. The first transport of inmates launched under heavy guard from the Kennedy orbital lift. Through the viewport of the control tower, Elon Lusk watched the shuttle ascend, its drive plume vanishing into the shadow of the carrier Liberty's gate. Beside him, a Space Force colonel muttered something about voluntary conscription. Ian said nothing. He just kept his eyes on the shuttle until it was gone. 5 years, he told himself. 5 years, and the colony would be self-sustaining. But in the void beyond Gliese's twin suns, something else was already moving. Something fast, something unregistered. And it was coming closer. Chapter 1. 8 years on. Commander Brian Baugh. The colony's main reactor throbbed like a heartbeat through the metal bones of Gliese Station Alpha, a vibration that had become so constant that Brian Baugh hardly noticed it anymore. He leaned against the reinforced viewport in his office, arms crossed, eyes on the sprawling mining fields beyond the compound. The machines worked day and night in the dust-choked air, clawing into Gliese 667c's crust for the metals that kept Earth's economy moving. Twin suns rode high over the jagged ridges, one burning gold, the other casting a pale blue wash across the world's surface, turning shadows into strange two-tone shapes. 8 years. 8 years in this gravity, in this thin, dry air. Before that, Brian's boots had been in the dirt of a dozen worlds closer to home. He'd been Space Force before Space Force was a household name. Back when it was still a branch of the Air Force, underfunded, experimental, mocked by half of Washington. He'd flown atmospheric fighters on Titan patrol, run escort for ore haulers through pirate-heavy asteroid belts, and once spent 6 weeks in a dead zone listening post-orbiting Neptune, watching for anything not filed on a registry. The Navy had their admirals, the Army had their generals, but the Space Force had been small enough that rising through the ranks came from survival as much as skill. Brian had a talent for both. When Lusk and the Alcubierre Drive changed everything, the Pentagon needed commanders who could run a military operation under civilian disguise, keep order without making the colony feel like a prison. Brian was an obvious pick. Not that the not-a-prison thing had lasted long. The inmate workforce program had changed the whole feel of Gliese 667C. At first, it had been contractors, engineers, and career miners. Now, half the boots on the ground had prison records. The other half either didn't care or had learned not to ask too many questions. Brian wasn't a warden. He was a commander. And if you asked him, the two weren't that different out here. Life on Gliese 667C. Life on Gliese 667C wasn't romantic, like the propaganda vids made it look. Earth's media loved showing the sunrise over the twin suns, the glitter of freshly cut ore under alien light, the heroic shots of workers walking in slow motion toward docking bays, with music swelling underneath. The truth smelled like lubricants, ionized dust, and sweat. The colony was divided into 5 districts, each with its own function. 1. The pit, the primary mining zone, a yawning scar in the planet's crust, where automated drills and human crews work side by side. The air shimmered here with heat and fine particles, the constant thump of seismic hammers carrying through the ground. 2. The spine, a series of vertical ore elevators that moved loads from the pit floor to surface-level refineries. The vibration from these lifts was constant and bone-deep. 3. The rings, circular processing plants that extracted metals and packed them into magnetic containers for shipment. Always noisy, always running. 4. Hab 1 and 2, the domed living quarters. Hab 1 was for contractors and enlisted personnel. Hab 2 was for inmates. Guards and cameras were everywhere in Hab 2, and the lighting was deliberately harsh to discourage loitering. 5. The dock, where the colony met the void. Cargo freighters, troop transports, and shuttles came and went at all hours. Work rotations were brutal. Inmates ran 12-hour shifts, 6 days a week, in exchange for food, medical care, and the promise of freedom at the end of 5 years. Break a rule badly enough, and you could lose your early release. Break the wrong rule, and you could lose everything. Most wore their jumpsuits open to the waist in the heat, prison tattoos crawling across their skin. They moved in crews, bonded by necessity more than choice. Some were career criminals who'd learned to keep their heads down. Others were loud, defiant, daring the guards to make good on threats. The contractors weren't much different, except their jumpsuits were clean and their paychecks actually meant something. And when the shifts ended, you could tell the difference between those who would one day go home and those who never really had one. Hazards were everywhere. One wrong step in the pit could send you into an unshielded extraction shaft. A plasma line leak in the rings could flash burn you to the bone before the alarm finished sounding. The planet's gravity was just heavy enough to make every fall dangerous, every lift a strain. Despite it all, there was a strange rhythm to life here. The constant hum of machinery, the bark of foremen, the hiss of shuttle seals opening and closing. It was a place where people kept moving, because stopping was when the weight of this world pressed in on you. By the time Brian had finished his morning rounds, the heat of the day had already turned the compound's outer walkways into shimmering rivers of light. The suns were nearly overhead, one casting its golden glow, the other cooling it with pale blue, the shadows caught between 2 different colors. From the observation gantry, the colony looked like it might stretch forever. But Brian knew that beyond the perimeter fence, there was nothing. Just rock, dust, and the black vacuum above. And somewhere far out in that black, something was coming toward them. The friction point. Running a mining colony 23.5 light years from Earth was hard enough. Running one when half your workforce was made up of convicted felons, that was a different breed of difficulty. Every morning, Brian's inbox lit up with reports. Earth HQ demanding higher ore yields to meet trade quotas. Inmate supervisors logging disciplinary issues, fights, theft, contraband smuggling. A maintenance chief's screaming for parts that wouldn't arrive for weeks, maybe months. Medical requesting more doctors and supplies after injuries in the pit. On Gliese 667C, nothing happened quickly. If a machine broke, you couldn't just call a tech from Earth. Spare parts came from orbital foundries, and if they didn't have it, you built it from whatever you could cannibalize. Earth HQ didn't care about that. The boardrooms in Washington saw the colony as a pipeline. Raw ore in, refined profit out. If Brian's weekly numbers dipped, someone on the other end of a secure channel would question his resource management strategies. "I'm managing resources just fine," Brian had snapped once. You try keeping a plasma drill running with spit and duct tape while your operators are 2 strikes away from losing their early release. The video feed had gone quiet. The next week, HQ sent him a motivational leadership memo. The political situation made it worse. The United States still controlled warp travel. That gave Washington power. But it also gave the rest of Earth a reason to resent them. Every ton of ore pulled from Gliese soil and sold on the global market was another reminder that one nation had its hands on the galaxy's steering wheel. Brian didn't care for politics, but he had to deal with them. The contractors on his station came from every territory. Former nations now folded into the United Earth territories. Old grudges died hard. Inmates brought their own gang allegiances and criminal rivalries. Keeping the peace here wasn't just about enforcing the rules. It was about stopping old Earth from infecting new worlds. Then there was Lusk. The man might have built the Alcubierre Drive, but when he came to Gliese, Brian could see it. The dreamer trying to live in a place that didn't have room for dreams. Lusk wanted to talk long-term colonization, terraforming, cultural exchange. Brian wanted enough bodies to work the mines without stabbing each other. On paper, they had the same goal. In reality, they spoke 2 different languages. And now, with an unidentified object burning a line toward Gliese at impossible speeds, the operational headaches were about to become something far more dangerous. Contact on the edge. It started like most big problems did, with a blip on a screen that shouldn't have been there. Lieutenant Harper found it first. She was running a routine deep scan from the G-array, 3 automated monitoring buoys stationed at the farthest stable orbit points in the system. Normally, all she saw were slow-moving mineral haulers, survey drones, and the occasional interstellar ice fragment. This was different. "Sir," she called over the comm, her voice steady but with an edge. "You might want to come down to control." When Brian arrived, the room was dim, lit only by the green-blue glow of tactical displays. Operators sat at their stations, murmuring to each other in low tones, eyes fixed on one screen. "What have we got?" he asked. Harper pointed to the central display. "Target acquired by G-Array 2. Inbound vector from system edge. Current velocity." She tapped a key, and a number appeared on the overlay. 0.3C. Brian blinked. "That's 1/3 the speed of light." "Yes, sir. No transponder signal, no ID handshake. It's not broadcasting in any standard human format." He stepped closer, eyes narrowing on the trajectory plot. The object was coming in fast and clean, without the usual burn signatures of a human drive. No course corrections. Just a straight, purposeful line toward Gliese. "What's the drive profile look like?" "That's the other thing," Harper said. "It doesn't look like anything in the registry. No Alcubierre field distortion, no Aeon or plasma trace. Honestly, sir, it's like it's not pushing through space at all. It's just here 1 second, further along the next." Brian felt the weight of the words. Warp drives left a signature. The compression and expansion of space-time had a telltale echo on long-range scans. This was silent. "Have we tried hailing on every frequency?" No reply. "Either they can't hear us or they're ignoring us." He turned to the communications officer. "Push it to Earth Command. Level 1 priority. And flag the timestamp for Lusk's office." I want him looking at these readings in the next 30 minutes. For the next hour, the room was a tight coil of motion, operators running predictive models, analysts mapping possible intercept windows, technicians triple-checking the GRA feeds to make sure the anomaly wasn't just a glitch. It wasn't a glitch. The object was big, easily twice the mass of the largest human warship, and its speed meant there would be no intercept unless they launched within the next 2 days. And that assumed they could match its vector without burning every drop of fuel in the fleet's tanks. Brian stood behind Harper, watching the red icon crawl across the display toward the inner system. "What's your gut?" he asked quietly. Harper hesitated. "Honestly, sir, if they wanted to hide, they could have done it. They want us to see them coming." Brian gave a grim nod. "Then I guess we should get ready for company. The word gets out." Officially, the sensor readings were classified. Unofficially, they were already halfway through the colony by the end of the day. It started in the dock. Someone overheard a comm tech muttering about a ghost ship in the black over coffee. That turned into a loader telling a foreman it was a pirate carrier the size of a city. By the time the story reached Hab 2, the inmate quarters, it had become an alien dreadnought coming to wipe us all out. Brian caught wind of it during his evening round. He passed 2 contractors in the corridor, their voices low. "Told you, man," I heard Harper herself saw it on the scope. "Then why the hell hasn't Command said anything?" "Because they don't want us panicking before it's too late." The moment they saw Brian, both men shut their mouths and kept walking. Inmates were worse. They had no faith in Command to begin with, so rumors became gospel overnight. By lights out, the common room in Hab 2 was buzzing with theories. 1. The US was covering up a crash site in the outer moons. 2. The GRA had picked up a fleet, not a single ship. 3. The colony was going to be evacuated, and only the real citizens would be taken. Fights broke out over nothing. A seat at a table, a game of cards, a bump in the hallway. Security reported 3 separate assaults before midnight. The next morning, Brian stood on the observation gantry overlooking the pit. The machinery droned, the smell of scorched ore hanging in the air. Crews worked, but slower than usual, eyes drifting toward the hazy sky, as if they expected to see something break through at any moment. Harper's voice came over his comm. "Sir." Earth Command just pinged back. "Congress is convening an emergency session, and President Hurlbut himself is requesting a secure call." Brian stared at the horizon, the twin suns blazing down. The rumors were bad enough. The truth was going to be worse. Chapter 2. Unknown Signature. The Sweep. The control center was quieter than usual. Not calm, just quiet, like the moment before a storm when the air feels too still. Banks of holographic displays wrapped the room, each showing a different slice of Gliese 667C's surrounding space. Brian stood at the center console, leaning one hand on the edge, eyes fixed on the red tracking icon that represented the inbound object. Harper and the sensor crew had already run 2 scans. He wanted 5 more. "Full sweep," he said. "Every array, every buoy, every drone in the outer system. I don't care if you have to bounce the signal off a mining relay in the Kuiper Belt. I want every scrap of data." Operators moved fast, fingers dancing over hollow keyboards, calling out distances, adjusting filters. One feed shifted to show the object's energy profile. It wasn't like anything in the human database. Instead of the jagged spikes of a warp field or the steady wave of an ion drive, it pulsed, slow, rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat. "What's powering it?" Brian asked. "Best guess," Harper said, scrolling through the data. "Some kind of zero-point extraction. It's pulling energy from nothing. Or maybe from space itself. No Alcubierre field." She shook her head. "None. And that's not the scary part." She tapped the hologram, expanding the energy signature into a volumetric model. "Look at the scale." The object's hull outline glimmered in ghostly blue. It stretched longer than any human warship, wide enough to swallow the colony's main landing dock whole. Brian frowned. "It's massive. 320 meters bow to stern," Harper said. 200 across at the widest point. Sir, it's bigger than the Independence-class carriers by at least 30%. He glanced at the data again. No registry ping, no friendly if, no human power signature, and moving like it didn't give a damn who saw it coming. The communications officer looked up. "Sir, we just rechecked every known vessel record. Military, civilian, corporate, even the black market registry. This ship's not on any list, not even under an alias." Brian's jaw tightened. "So it's not one of ours?" "No, sir. And one more thing," the officer added, hesitant. "We ran a heat profile scan. There's minimal output from the engines, but the internal energy readings are off the charts. It's running at full power, without putting out waste heat like a normal reactor." Brian didn't like mysteries in space. "Mysteries in space got people killed. Locked down all long-range transmissions from the colony," he said. "Nobody outside of command talks about this. Not until we know what it is. That order would hold for maybe 12 hours before the rumor mill spun up again. But it was long enough to get the information to Earth without triggering a panic. And Earth would panic. The hill tilts. The first briefing hit Washington at Sierra 312 Eastern, stamped top secret, and routed to exactly 27 inboxes. By 0600, there were already leaks. By 0715, the Senate Armed Services Committee was in a closed-door session and confiscating staffers' phones like it was high school detention. The Situation Room smelled like recycled coffee and cold air. On the main wall, a live telemetry feed from Gliese showed a crimson arc, the unknown object's projected path, cutting into the inner system like a scalpel. "Let's keep this simple," Chairwoman Val-Ortiz said, palms flat on the table. "Do we engage or observe?" No one laughed. Observe sounded smart until a third of Lightspeed visitor parked over a colony and asked awkward questions like, "Why are you pointing missiles at us?" Admiral Rhys, Space Force Strategic Command, cleared his throat. "Rules of space engagement give us 3 lanes: monitor, shadow, or intercept. We can't shadow at that velocity. Intercept requires burning an entire flotilla on a best-guess vector. Monitor is what we're doing now. Monitor feels like waiting to be surprised," Senator Keegan said. "I don't like surprise. You're in politics," Ortiz said dryly. "It comes with the wallpaper." The intel lead, a young fussy woman named Taryn Holt, brought up a spectral analysis. No Alcubierre distortion, no ion trace. The energy signature is novel. We've scrubbed every registry, military, commercial, syndicate, and the stuff we pretend we don't track. It's not one of ours, and not one of theirs. As far as theirs means human. "So alien," Keegan said. Holt hesitated. "So, unclassified non-human technology. Alien," Keegan repeated, slower, as if the syllables could be forced into something comfortable. On the far side, the House Majority Leader leaned in. "We pick a fight with something that big and misread its capabilities. We'll write the after-action from orbit while we're homeless." The Minority Leader countered. "Or we let it stroll up to our most strategic off-world asset because we're worried about hurting its feelings. You all love deterrence until you have to show any." President Michael Hurlburt listened without interrupting. He had that stillness that made TV anchors use phrases like measured and presidential while his detractors called it cold. He'd been in the chair long enough to know the difference between theater and threat. This felt like both. "Options," he said finally. Admiral Rhys ticked them off. 1. Do nothing. Keep collecting. Low risk, high ignorance. 2. Broadcast a wideband greeting, stake out intentions, invite a controlled rendezvous at the Gliese relay. Moderate risk, moderate ignorance. 3. Launch an intercept wing ahead of it. Announce we're escorting. High risk if they read that as blockade. 4. Forward deploy assets to Gliese, and make clear we'll defend the colony if necessary. "Ships coming either way," Ortiz said. "Observation won't change that." Keegan jabbed a finger at the hologram. "And what if it's not alone?" Holt switched overlays. Probabilistic models, cone spreads, faint ghost tracks where another ship could ride sensor shadow. "No second signature. Doesn't mean there isn't one. But we don't see it." A junior member, new to the committee, still believing meetings change the world, asked, "What does the Federation say?" Silence. Then Holt again, careful. Unofficial back channel suggests the Grogans are aware, unclear if this is them. Their spokesman hasn't filed any diplomatic notice, so not Federation protocol, Ortiz said. Great. The president folded his hands. Congress will want oversight. Ortiz gave him a look that said, You have it right now. Use it. Mr. President, the longer we wait, the more this turns into a panic loop on the ground. Your colony commander is sitting on a powder magazine. Contractors, inmates, and an internet connection with a conspiracy addiction. Re-added, delay also narrows our launch window. If we're going to put a detachment on an intercept vector, the burn math gets ugly after 12 hours. The minority leader tried one more tack. We posture soft. We invite disrespect. We posture hard. We invite war. Pick your poison. Hurlbut stood. The room quieted on instinct. We're not posturing, he said. We're planning. He turned to Rhys. Draft a limited force package. Defensive row. No first strike. Make it clear we're escorting, not corralling. We'll project strength without picking a fight. To Ortiz, I'll brief the Gang of 8 within the hour and file the necessary notifications for emergency authorization. To Holt, keep the Grogan channel warm. If this is them, I want clarity. If it's not, I want them aligned when we say hello. And if hello goes sideways, Keegan asked. Hurlbut met his eyes. Then our job is to make sure sideways doesn't become down, no one argued. The screen blinked. New timestamp, same red arc, closer now. Politics would keep bickering long after the meeting ended. But the vote beneath the noise had already happened. The hill had tilted, and gravity, as always, was merciless. Operation Stalins. By 1300 Eastern, the decision was no longer theoretical. The order moved down the chain like a signal through a living nerve. Clean, direct, and impossible to ignore. From the Oval Office to Space Force Command in Colorado Springs. From there to the Gliese Expeditionary Defense Network, and finally into the mission queue of every pilot, marine, and logistics officer who'd signed the right clearance papers. Operation Stalins was greenlit. The backbone of the mission would be the 3rd Interstellar Defense Wing, call sign Vanguard. 4 Alcubierre-equipped interceptors, sleek, needle-nosed craft, designed for both high-velocity maneuvers and sustained orbit-to-surface op, would spearhead the formation. Each could run independently at 0.7 C with short bursts, beyond that for evasive action. Behind them, the USSF Resolute, a newly refitted Independence-class carrier, would act as mobile command and quick reaction base. Loaded with a marine detachment, its own fighter wing, and 2 long-range recon drones, it was the closest thing Earth had to a flag in deep space. The rules of engagement were carved into every brief. No weapons lock without direct hostile action. Maintain intercept vector within 1,000 km, but do not block trajectory. A priority 1, protect Gliese 667C colony. A priority 2, establish communications. A priority 3, if necessary, screen alien vessel from planetary orbit until further instructions. The mission prep bays in Colorado Springs were a frenzy of precision chaos. Technicians strapping sensor arrays into interceptor hulls, engineers cycling Alcubierre cores through warm-up tests, armorers issuing compressed mag plasma rifles to the Marine contingent. In Hangar 12, Captain Aria Keene was already in her flight suit, running gloved fingers over the fuselage of her craft, Sabre 2. She'd been in the cockpit for every major engagement of the past decade, and yet this felt different. The pre-mission banter was gone. No one was talking about glory or pay bumps. Every pilot knew they'd be nose to nose with something Earth had never seen before. Looks like we're the welcome wagon, her wingman, Lieutenant Ross Adler said, trying for casual but landing closer to grim. Yeah, Keene replied, without looking up. Let's hope they like the flowers. In orbit above Earth, the Resolute hung against the black like a predator at rest, her hull gleaming under the filtered light of the sun. On the flight deck, Commander Gage Tanaka reviewed the final loading report. Fuel cells at capacity, food and water stores for 60 days, medical bay at full staff. Every system was green. Tanaka knew enough history to appreciate the irony. Earth's first dedicated space warship was about to launch not into battle, but into diplomacy enforced by the threat of battle. When the launch order came through, It was delivered in person to every ship commander. President Hurlbert's voice was steady, pre-recorded, and transmitted across secure channels only. You are tasked with meeting the unknown on terms that preserve both peace and dignity. Your presence will speak for our species. Let it speak well. But should it become necessary, let it speak with strength. In Colorado, the Interceptor's Alcubierre rings began their spin-up, each rotation a shimmer of refracted starlight. On the Resolute, reactor cores thrummed to life, cycling to warp readiness. The first jump window would open in 4 minutes. Far across the system, on Gliese 667C, Brian Baugh stood in the control center, watching as the mission manifest scrolled across his own secure screen. Operation Starlance would arrive within 20 hours, fast enough to beat the alien ship's estimated arrival at the colony by just under 3. 3 hours. That was all the buffer they had. Lusk's warning. Brian didn't bother calling Ian Lusk. He knew the man would be watching every data feed coming out of Gliese. Sure enough, less than an hour after the Starlance order hit his terminal, the comm panel chimed with an encrypted priority link. Lusk's face appeared in sharp relief on the holo display, framed by the sterile white glow of his lab on Earth. His hair was more silver than Brian remembered, his eyes set deep with a kind of sleepless intensity that didn't come from age. "You've seen the package?" Lusk asked without preamble. "Yeah," Brian said, leaning back in his chair. 4 interceptors, the Resolute Marine Detachment. Defensive posture only. Lusk's expression didn't change. Defensive posture's a nice phrase. What it means is, we hope they're friendly, because if they're not, we're screwed. Brian didn't answer right away. "We've faced long odds before." "This isn't odds," Lusk said. "It's math. And math doesn't care about hope." The scientist reached off-screen and returned with a hollow projection of the alien ship's energy profile, spinning slowly above the console between them. Brian had already seen the numbers, but Lusk began pointing out the details like a teacher walking through a lesson. "Output here." He tapped at the pulsing central core, is stable at levels far beyond our reactor capacities. "That's sustained, not a peak. And here," the outline rippled, "is the kicker. There's no waste heat signature. Either their efficiency is at 99%, or they're dumping it somewhere we can't track." Brian frowned. "And what does that tell you?" "It tells me they're not just ahead of us," Lusk said. "They're on a different playing field altogether. If they wanted to, they could pass through this system without us even knowing they were here." Brian's eyes narrowed. "So why don't they? Why fly in hot and straight, like they want us to see them?" Lusk leaned back, the faintest hint of a grim smile on his face. "That's the question that's keeping me from sleeping. Either they're extending a hand, or they want to see how we react to one, and your gut." Lusk's smile faded. "If this ship came here, we're already behind. Whatever this is, Brian, we're not the ones setting the tempo. They are. And that means every move we make from here on out is reaction, not initiative." The comm channel clicked as a new alert came through. Flashing at the bottom of Brian's console, "ETA, alien vessel to system's inner boundary, 21 hours, 46 minutes. "Looks like the clock started," Brian said quietly. "Then you'd better hope Starlance is more than a PR stunt," Lusk replied. "Because if they don't like what they find, there won't be time for second chances." The line went dead. Brian sat there for a long moment staring at the empty screen, until Harper's voice crackled over his comm from control. "Commander, we've got something new on sensors." Chapter 3. First Contact. First Visual. The first clear image came through at 0213 local time. It began as a faint shimmer against the deep black beyond Gliese's outer moon, a distortion in the star field that didn't belong. For hours, the unknown object had been nothing more than a red arc on the tactical display, a mass reading, a heartbeat of alien energy on the sensors. Now, it was real. The feed came from Georay 2, one of the outer deep space buoys. Its optical lens locked onto the source and began magnifying. At first, it was just light, refracting and twisting as though the space around it bent differently. Then, the hull emerged, layer upon layer of angled plating, some smooth as polished stone, others ridged with lines that glowed faint blue. The ship didn't look built so much as grown. Its surfaces shifted subtly, like muscles moving beneath skin. Geometric markings, circles, chevrons, and long tapering arcs, crawled with iridescence that seemed to change color depending on the viewing angle. Brian stood in the control center with Harper and the entire sensor crew. No one spoke for a full 30 seconds as the alien ship filled the display wall. Harper finally broke the silence. Jesus, look at the scale markers. Brian's eyes moved to the size reference in the corner of the feed. The silhouette of an Independence-class carrier was displayed for comparison, just a sliver next to the alien craft's profile. 5 times the length, Harper said. More than 10 times the mass, the ship's forward section curved into a crescent, like a scythe blade. Between its twin arcs was a black void that seemed to swallow the starlight entirely. "What's that?" Brian asked, pointing at the central gap. "Not sure," Harper admitted. "Could be a docking aperture. Could be a weapon. Could be both." As more images streamed in, the alien vessel rotated, showing its dorsal planes, vast, petal-like structures that flared outward before narrowing back toward the aft. Along the spine, an array of luminous nodes pulsed in sequence, each beat matching the energy rhythm they'd been tracking for days. The colony rumor mill went nuclear. By dawn, contractors were sneaking onto comm lines to tell family back on Earth they'd seen the alien ship with their own eyes. Inmates were whispering about the Reapers and First Strike protocols. From the observation gantry, Brian could see people lingering outside after shift change, looking up at the morning sky, as though they might catch a glimpse. It was still too far for the naked eye, but that didn't stop them from trying. In the control center, the tactical map updated. The alien ship's velocity was dropping, not to sublight crawl, but enough to suggest intentional deceleration. "They see us," Harper said quietly. Brian didn't answer. He already knew. "Operation Starlance engages." The jump signatures bloomed like silent auroras above Gliese. First came the ripples, space itself wincing. Then 4 needle-nosed interceptors snapped into existence on a tight rhombus, contrails of ionized dust briefly sketching their arrival before vacuum erased the lines. A heartbeat later, the USSF Resolute shouldered through the fold, a dark, angular continent against the starfield, running lights low, Alcubierre ring still humming as it spooled down. "Starlance formation. Check in," Commander Gage Tanaka said from the carrier sea, voice calm over a chorus of status calls. "Saber 1. Green across the board. Saber 2. Green. Saber 3. Green. Saber 4. Green and hungry." On Gliese, Brian watched the telemetry handoff, his control center's feeds meshing with the carrier's higher fidelity suite. Resolution sharpened. The alien ship was no longer an image. It was a target box, with numbers that made seasoned pilots swear under their breath. "Vector lock achieved," Harper reported. "Range to contact. 260,000 clicks and closing." Tanaka's ops chief marked a corridor in pale blue on the TAC plot, a respectful lane parallel to the alien vessel's trajectory. "Escort posture," Tanaka said. "Never cross the nose. Keep 1,000 kilometers lateral separation. If they decel hard, you match. Do not get sucked across their bow. Copy escort," said Captain Aria Keen. Saber 2, settling into the groove. She tightened her harness until the edges bit into her flight suit, a ritual pain that focused her mind. The alien ship filled half her HUD. It had the disorienting scale of a mountain floating in a dream. "Broadcast package going live," comms announced on the wideband. The preloaded hail spilled out across every human and known Federation frequency. Greetings, identity, intent, all wrapped in a clean protocol handshake, and a beacon pulse that screamed, "We're not prey and we're not predators, so let's talk." The alien vessel answered with motion. No burn, no flare, just a gentle, impossible slide, as if someone nudged a moon with one finger. Its spine rotated 20 degrees to present a broadside to the human formation, petal-like dorsal planes, unfurling a fraction. Along that spine, the luminous nodes changed rhythm, 1-2, pause, 1-2, pause, not random, patterned. "Telemetry confirms they acknowledge our presence," Holt said from the intel console aboard the Resolute. "Posture unknown. It could be equivalent of I see you. Could be, well, we don't have a could be." Hold formation, Tanaka replied. Keen, take 2 and 3 high, 1 and 4 low. Keep the bubble tight. The interceptors obeyed, splitting into stacked pairs that bracketed the alien ship's path. Keen's craft shivered as her Alcubierre collar bled off residual charge. The stars seemed to breathe in and out at the edges of her canopy. Getting something, Adler, Sabre 3, murmured. Not M, not thermal. Feels like pressure on the boards. Keen saw it too. Her instruments drifting off 0 like a compass near a magnet. They're touching the local field, she said. Harmless so far. Resolute to formation, prepare for linguistic handshake, Tanaka said. Holosuite is live. We'll try symbol logic first. On the carrier, a projection sphere blossomed, feeding a synchronized light sequence outward. Primes, Fibonacci, hydrogen spin flip, humanity's usual math as olive branch. The alien ship's nodes flickered back. 1, 2, pause, 1, 2, 3, pause, 1 long hold, 1. Different, but undeniably structured. Holy. Someone breathed on the CIC loop. Copy that, Holt said crisply. They're either counting or mocking us for counting. Keep going. Keen's threat receiver chimed once, softly, just a politer hem from a machine that had screamed blue murder in real firefights. A shadow rippled across the alien vessel's central crescent. For a sick moment, she thought a bay was opening. It wasn't. The void between the arcs deepened like a pupil dilating. Starlins, posture check. Tanaka's voice had lost none of its calm. Weapons safed, safeties visible. Repeat, visible. If they're reading our M signature, they'll see the locks. Don't give them a reason to doubt our brochure. 2 copies, Keen said. Her thumb hovered a centimeter from the master arm switch and stayed there. Resolute, I'm painting micromotions along the dorsal petals, Sabre 1 reported. Not deploy, more like breath. Concur, Keen said softly. The hull didn't look like hull. It looked like something alive pretending to be hull. The thought made her throat go dry. The Hail package cycled to phonemes, broadband tones mapping to vowel-consonant pairs, rising in complexity. The alien ship's reply shifted with it. The spine lights abandoned the 1-2 cadence and flowed into a river of pulses that looked random, until Keen's brain clicked sideways and saw the repetition folded inside the chaos. Pattern lock, Holt said. We're getting somewhere on Gliese. The control center's observation windows had gone black to kill internal reflection. The whole room was lit only by the alien and the human ballet above the planet. Brian stood with his hands behind his back. Any change in velocity? Minor decel continues, Harper answered. Projected orbit insertion possible within the hour. If they're planning a flyby, they're doing it in slow motion. Tanaka keyed a private line to the president's secure channel, relayed through Gliese. Sir, we have acknowledgement behavior and non-hostile maneuvering. Request permission to initiate directed narrow-beam greeting, 1 ship to ship. Granted, Hulbert said, his voice steady. Pick your most fluent. Tanaka didn't hesitate. Sabre 2, Keen. You're up. Keen swallowed once and toggled her mic. Unknown vessel. This is USSF Interceptor Sabre 2 of Operation Starlins, escorting the USSF Resolute in defense of the Gliese 667C colony. We come in peace and request reciprocal identification and intent. Her words carried on a tight beam, braided with the math sequence, framed by enough diplomatic boilerplate to build a courthouse. For 3 long seconds, the only answer was that slow dilation of the crescent void. Then her cockpit dimmed as every display inverted to black, and a line of symbols wrote themselves across her HUD. Clean, elegant, curved, like writing carved by water. Resolute. Did you push that? Adler blurted. Negative, Tanaka said at once. We're read-only. Sabre 2, confirm. They're writing on my glass, Keen said, trying to keep her voice level. Stand by for capture. She routed the HUD feed back to the carrier. The symbols repeated, then shifted. The second line paired each alien curve with a human letter. Not a full alphabet, more like a handshake between scripts. Holt sounded almost giddy. They're mapping us while we map them. A final glyph bloomed, larger than the rest, then simplified itself into blocky Terran letters one by one, K-A-L-T-R-E-K. The bridge fell quiet. "Name or title?" Tanaka asked. Holt exhaled. "Either." Both, a third line appeared beneath the first two, rendered now entirely in human characters, as if whoever, or whatever, was on the other end had decided to stop showing off. "We see you. We match your pace. We come without harm." Keen's heart thudded in her ears. She glanced left. Sabre 1 held perfect position. Right. Sabre 3 and 4 rode the corridor like beads on a wire. The Resolute loomed below, big enough to feel like safety, and small enough to feel like a lie. "Transmit acknowledgement," Tanaka said, voice softer than before. "And hold formation. We keep escort until they tell us otherwise." Above the twin suns of Gliese, humanity's first escort of an alien capital ship settled into a rhythm, 4 needles, and a carrier pacing a mountain that breathed. On the HUD, the last line of text flickered, then reshaped into one new sentence that made every human spine in 2-star systems straighten at once. "Request. Meet with your speaker. The President's arrival." The decision came faster than most of the President's cabinet wanted. Less than 30 minutes after Caltrek's message scrolled across the Stalin's formation's HUDs, Michael Hurlbut announced he was going to Gliese 667C in person. On paper, it was framed as a decisive step in direct diplomacy. Behind closed doors, it was a chess move with equal parts risk and theatre. Some advisers called it reckless, others called it brilliant. Hurlbut's own reasoning was simpler. If the first real conversation between Earth and another species happens, I want to be in the room. The USSF Resolute dropped from escort duty long enough to collect him. He arrived aboard a presidential transport, heavily modified for Alcubierre travel, a compact, angular craft with enough ECM and kinetic shielding to make a warship jealous. 2 interceptor escorts bracketed it in the fold, emerging together above Gliese's upper atmosphere. Brian Baugh watched the RE entry burn from the colony's landing bay observation deck. Twin plumes cut the sky, bright white spears angling down toward the main pad. The Resolute's captain came down the ramp first, scanning the perimeter before signaling the all clear. Then Hurlbut appeared, tall and deliberate, flanked by 2 Secret Service agents in dark vacuum armor. His face was calm, but his eyes moved the way Brian had seen in combat veterans, taking everything in, slotting details into place. They shook hands in the shadow of the bay's blast doors. "Commander Baugh," Hurlbut said, his voice steady. "Thank you for holding the line." Brian didn't sugarcoat it. "Line's still there, sir. Can't promise for how long." Hurlbut's mouth twitched in the ghost of a smile. "That's why I'm here," inside the command center. The President was brought up to speed on the Starlance formation's ongoing escort. Holofeeds showed the alien vessel pacing in perfect sync, the luminous nodes along its spine still pulsing in that measured rhythm. Caltrek's name hovered above the alien profile in block text. "What's your read?" Hurlbut asked Brian once they were alone in the war room. Brian considered. "They've done nothing hostile. They've matched our posture exactly. If they wanted to take the colony, they'd already be in orbit, and if they wanted to bait us." Brian didn't answer right away. "Then they'd be doing exactly this. Closing the distance slow enough for us to wonder, fast enough that we have to make a move." Outside the closed door, the political entourage murmured in low voices. Some of the President's staff saw the trip as a show of strength, humanity's leader meeting the alien envoy face to face. Others saw it as walking into the unknown without a map. In orbit, the Grogan still hadn't made a move. That was about to change. The Grogan intervention. It began with a flicker on the Starlance formation's tactical boards. Brief, sharp, and then gone. Keen thought it was a sensor hiccup until the void ahead rippled a second time. Deeper this time, like a curtain being drawn back. A Grogan ship stepped out of the fold. Compared to the alien behemoth pacing the convoy, the newcomer was modest, still over 1 kilometer long, with a flattened spearhead profile and a dorsal fin that swept backward like the crest of some enormous aquatic predator. Its hull shimmered in liquid shades of bronze and green. The plating segmented into overlapping layers that flexed slightly as the ship moved. The Grogan vessel slowed immediately upon arrival, Alcubierre wake still shimmering off its flanks. No human ship ever exited a fold that cleanly. "New contact matches, Grogan Diplomatic Registry," Holt reported aboard the Resolute. Designation, VSR Kaleri. Confirmed envoy class. Within seconds, the Kaleri was broadcasting on an encrypted Federation channel. The message was brief and precise. Request direct audience with Earth leadership on Gliese 667C purpose. Immediate diplomatic advisement. In the colony's main landing bay, the Grogan shuttle looked like an armored seed pod as it descended on thruster plumes. The hull split open in 4 petal-like sections, a ramp folding down to touch the bay deck. Caltrek emerged. He was taller than any human in the bay, easily 7.5 feet, his frame long and almost feline in its balance. His skin was smooth, a deep bronze that caught the twin sunlight like polished metal. Across his high brow and down the length of his jawline ran thin, bioluminescent veins, pulsing, faintly, in the same rhythm as the alien ship's spine lights. His clothing was a layered combination of fabric and something more like flexible armor plating, patterned with geometric symbols similar to those on the alien ship's hull. His eyes, almond-shaped, set a bit wider than human, were the color of deep ocean at night with flecks of silver that caught the light when he moved. When he reached the bottom of the ramp, he inclined his head slightly, not a bow, but a gesture of recognition. His voice, when he spoke, was deep, resonant, and carried the faintest mechanical undertone. President Michael Hurlbut, Commander Brian Baugh. I am Caltrek, planetary envoy of the Grogan Confederacy, representative to the Federation of Planets. We request to speak in secured quarters. The President extended a hand, though Caltrek did not take it. Instead, the Grogan stepped closer, his eyes locking on Hurlbut's with a kind of measuring calm. You must understand, Caltrek said, your world has been seen and judged. The ship above is ours, here in peace. But there is much that must be said before we proceed further. The 3 of them, Hurlbut, Brian, and Caltrek, walked together toward the secured meeting room. The bay crew watched in total silence. For all the speeches and policy debates, this was the moment they would remember. The President of the United States walking beside something not from Earth, neither side showing fear. Inside, the first real negotiation between humanity and another species was about to begin. The message. The secure conference room had been built for high-level military briefings, reinforced walls, independent power, no external comms. Today, it held something far rarer, the first diplomatic exchange between Earth and an alien envoy. Caltrek stood at the head of the table, flanked by 2 Grogan aides in matching layered armor. He didn't sit. Neither did Hurlbut or Brian. When he spoke, the resonance of his voice seemed to hum in the walls. Earth is not alone, Caltrek began, his tone carrying no drama, only certainty. Beyond your system lies the Federation of Planets, a council of over 1,000 member worlds and species. Most are peaceful. All are fiercely protective of their homes. They share knowledge, defend against common threats, and regulate expansion into unclaimed systems. He gestured slightly upward toward the alien vessel still pacing in orbit. The Vorkyle, the ship you see above, is one of our diplomatic carriers. It is also a symbol. Its presence signals that we are willing to meet you openly. But its size and power also serve another message. One meant for those who might wish to take what is yours. Hurlbut folded his arms. You're telling us you came in peace, but with a reminder that you could wipe us out if you didn't. Caltrek inclined his head. In your words, yes, not to threaten. To prepare, his silver-flecked eyes locked on Hurlbut. We have watched your world. You are inventive, ambitious, resourceful. But you are not ready to join the Federation. Brian's jaw tightened. And what makes you so sure of that? Your divisions, Caltrek said simply. You call yourselves nations, borders, flags. You cling to histories that divide you. The Federation does not accept worlds fractured by internal conflict. To stand among us, you must be one world. Earthlings, not Americans or territorials, or any other name you carry now. Hurlbut exchanged a glance with Brian before speaking. That's not going to happen overnight. It should have happened centuries ago, Caltrek replied, without a trace of malice. We will help, if you wish it. But the choice is yours. There are other species who will come here. some already in this system, seeking to mine the worlds around Gliese. Not all are bound by our laws. Your weapons are primitive, your defenses thin. Alone you will be taken. United you may stand. The room fell silent. Outside, the Vorkale drifted into a slow arc above the colony, its hull reflecting gold and blue light from the twin suns. Every few seconds the spine lights pulsed in that steady rhythm, visible even in daylight, a heartbeat in orbit. Caltrek stepped back from the table. The Federation waits for your decision. But time, as you measure it, is short. Hurlbut straightened. Then I suggest we start making arrangements. Later, as the President's entourage prepared for the first joint planning session with the Grogans, Brian stood on the command center's upper deck. Through the reinforced glass, he watched the alien ship hang motionless over Gliese, vast and patient. Harper came up beside him. "Hard to believe that's not a threat," she said quietly. Brian didn't look away from the glass. "Maybe it's both." Chapter 4. The Federation. The Explanation. The secure conference room felt smaller with Caltrek in it. Not because of his size. Though at 7.5 feet, the Grogan envoy was taller than everyone present. But because his presence seemed to alter the air itself. When he spoke, it wasn't simply his voice filling the space. It was the weight behind it. He stood at the far end of the table, hands clasped behind his back, and with the faintest motion of his head, one of his aides activated a cylindrical device on the table's center. A hollow display rose in silence, expanding outward into a three-dimensional map of the galaxy. It was not the galaxy humans were used to seeing in their astronomy classes. This one was marked with bright clusters of light, systems highlighted in vivid blues and greens, each with a thin, glowing line that traced back toward a larger central nexus. Between them were empty voids marked in red or amber. This, Caltrek began, is the known expanse of the Federation of Planets, 1,037 member worlds, each representing a unique species and their colonies. Our boundaries stretch across 7 spiral arms. Our reach is far, but it is not limitless. You will see the dark regions, territories we do not control. These are either uninhabited or uncontrolled. The map rotated slowly, zooming in on a sector far from Earth's position. The highlighted systems formed intricate constellations of light. Brian leaned forward, studying the map. "You're organized." Caltrek's eyes flickered toward him. "Organized, yes. Peaceful? Mostly. But peace is never assumed. It is earned, and it is guarded." With another gesture, the map shifted again. Now it displayed the interior of a vast structure, the Federation Council chamber. The hollow feed showed hundreds of different species, tall, short, scaled, furred, luminous, and more, arranged in concentric tiers around a central speaking platform. This is where the Federation governs itself. Each member world elects or appoints an envoy. We deliberate trade, exploration, defense, and mutual aid. We have a fleet, one of considerable size, to ensure the laws we agree upon are upheld. But the most important of those laws, the one from which all others follow, is this: no world may be interfered with until it has unified under a single planetary authority. Hurlbut kept his expression neutral, but his fingers drummed lightly on the table. "Meaning no contact with us until now." "Meaning," Caltrek corrected smoothly, "no official contact until now. There are exceptions for defense, diplomacy, or intervention when a younger world faces external threat. This meeting is one such exception." The map zoomed again, highlighting a scattering of red systems. "You must also understand, there are those beyond the Federation who do not share our restraint. Raiders, expansionists, species for whom conquest is not a last resort, but a way of life. Some of them already know your system's coordinates." Brian's eyes narrowed. "And you're saying the Federation protects its own from these kinds of threats?" Caltrek nodded once. "We do. And in return, we expect our members to be prepared to defend themselves and each other. Weakness invites danger. Division invites conquest." The hollow shifted one last time, zooming toward a tiny blue dot on the very edge of Federation space. It pulsed faintly in the dark. "This is your world," Caltrek said. You are distant from our central territories, but distance means little in the void. What matters is readiness, your readiness, to take your place among us, the shockwave on Earth. The announcement was not leaked, it was delivered. At precisely 0800 UTC, every broadcast network, every official government channel, every public holostream, and even the emergency alert bands carried the same transmission. The seal of the United Earth Territories fading into the image of President Michael Hurlburt standing at a podium inside the Gliese 667C command center. Caltrek stood beside him. For a full 10 seconds, the cameras simply drank in the sight. Humanity's leader framed against a backdrop of holographic stars. And beside him, a figure so unmistakably alien that there could be no mistake, no comfortable deniability, no clever CGI excuse. When Hurlburt spoke, his voice was steady, almost too calm. People of Earth, we are not alone. We never have been. The galaxy is home to civilizations older and more advanced than our own. Today, one of them has come openly to meet us, to speak to us, and to offer us a place among them, if we can prove worthy. He gestured toward Caltrek, who inclined his head slightly toward the camera. The broadcast cut to an image of the Vorkyle in orbit above Gliese, its massive crescent shape eclipsing the twin suns, flanked by the USSF Resolute and the Starlance interceptors. The scale was unmistakable. The alien vessel dwarfed everything near it. Across Earth, the reaction was immediate. In Lagos, crowds filled Victory Square, cheering and waving makeshift banners that read "Earth Rises." In Berlin, church bells rang while priests and imams stood side by side on cathedral steps, urging unity in the face of the greatest chapter of creation. In New Delhi, entire neighborhoods gathered around public projectors, silent except for the occasional gasp when the alien ship's details sharpened on the screen. In Tehran, the clerics convened emergency councils, issuing statements that ranged from measured acceptance to outright rejection of extraterrestrial influence. In Salt Lake City, some residents prayed openly in the streets, while others shouted that the Federation was a Trojan horse, meant to enslave humanity. Markets reacted just as violently. Gold prices cratered in minutes. What was rare on Earth was meaningless in a galactic economy. Companies tied to weapons manufacturing spiked in value. Orbital launch contractors went into overdrive, pitching Federation readiness packages to every government on the planet. Politicians scrambled. In Tokyo, the Prime Minister's cabinet met behind closed doors, trying to predict what unification under a single planetary government would do to Japan's sovereignty. In London, the Foreign Secretary addressed Parliament, calling for measured engagement, and in Washington, the House and Senate chambers buzzed with equal parts awe and suspicion. The United States might control warp travel, but now that monopoly meant nothing compared to the ability to cross light years without anyone noticing you were there. Social networks melted under the flood of speculation. Some accounts claimed the Federation had been visiting Earth for decades. Others spun conspiracy threads about planned unification as a long-term goal of the American government. Footage from the Gliese broadcast was dissected frame by frame, with self-proclaimed experts analyzing Caltrek's every movement for hidden signals. In a matter of hours, the world had gone from "Are we alone?" to "How will we survive among so many?" One people, not nations. Caltrek's words were not spoken into the cameras. They were spoken behind closed doors, in a conference chamber, deep inside the Gliese 667C command center, where only the President, the Joint Strategic Council, select territorial envoys, and a handful of aides could hear them in real time. The room was circular, the lights dimmed, so the galaxy map projected in the center could be seen clearly. Caltrek stood at its edge, bronze skin catching faint reflections of blue and gold from the twin suns outside the viewport. "To join us," he began, "you must first be one people. Not Americans, not Europeans, not Nigerians, Indians, or Martians. Earthlings. One homeworld, one voice in the Federation Council." He let the words hang. No one interrupted. "You may keep your cultural identities," he continued, "but not your political divisions. You cannot sit at our table while fighting over the shape of it." The silence broke. Senator Val Ortiz of the Americas Territory leaned forward. "You're asking billions of people to dissolve centuries of sovereignty. That's not unification, that's surrender." Caltrek's eyes shifted to her, silver flecks catching the light. In the Federation, sovereignty is defined by your planet, not your borders. Every species that sits in the Council has made the same choice. None regret it. Across the table, an envoy from the Eurasia territory shook his head. And those who refused? Caltrek did not look away. Some remain outside. They are vulnerable. Some were taken. President Hurlbut raised a hand to calm the growing murmur. The question is not whether unification is possible. It's whether we believe it's necessary for survival. That's the choice we have to make. From the Pacifica Territory delegation came a sharp laugh. Easy to say when you represent the nation holding the warp drive patents. Hurlbut didn't flinch. The Alcubierre Drive won't protect us from a hostile fleet the size of the Vorkyle. Unity will... Caltrek leaned over the projection table, the galaxy map reflecting across the planes of his face. The Federation's law is clear. Until your world speaks with one voice, you cannot be admitted. And without membership, the protection of the Federation's fleet will not extend to you. The predators who roam the void will not wait for you to be ready. The room was heavy with the unspoken truth. Earth's history was one of conflict. Wars over land, religion, resources, ideology. The thought of rewriting that into a singular planetary identity was as alien as the man delivering the ultimatum. Brian Baugh, silent until now, finally spoke. If the choice is between keeping our flags and keeping our planet, we all know which one we'll make. The question is, how long do we have before someone tests our answer? Caltrek's gaze held his. Less than you think, the trial period. The chamber emptied slowly after Caltrek's ultimatum, aides whispering to envoys, territorial leaders exchanging quick, clipped remarks as they filed out. The air still felt charged, as if the galaxy map's projection had left an afterimage burned into everyone's thoughts. Only President Hurlbut, Commander Brian Baugh, and Caltrek remained. Hurlbut stepped closer to the envoy, his voice low. You've given us the endgame, but I need the middle ground, something between fractured and unified. Give me that, and I can keep your offer alive without sparking a civil war on day one. Caltrek studied him for a long moment. A trial period, Hurlbut nodded. Provisional cooperation. You treat us as an observer state. We commit to political reforms toward unity. You provide mediation, limited technology exchange, and defense coordination against external threats. Limited, Caltrek repeated. No weapons technology, only defensive systems and non-military infrastructure upgrades. The Federation will not arm a divided world. That's acceptable, Hurlbut said. But we'll need your presence here, not just a ship overhead. The optics matter. Our people need to see you're here to help, not just judge. Caltrek inclined his head. I will remain until the trial concludes. 5 of your years. At its end, the Council will decide if Earth has earned full membership or must stand alone. Brian leaned forward, catching the envoy's gaze. And if the wrong kind of ship shows up before then? Caltrek's silver-flecked eyes hardened. Then, Commander Baugh, the Vorkyle will remind them why some predators hunt only in the shadows. The agreement was drafted in under an hour. Concise, deliberate, and clear. No one in the room missed the fact that it carried the same weight as a treaty, even if it wasn't called one. By the next day, President Hurlbut stood before a planet-wide audience once more, this time not with a revelation, but a challenge. Today, we begin the most ambitious project in our history, becoming one people. For 5 years, we will work toward unity, not as a surrender of our identities, but as an expansion of them. We will speak to the galaxy as Earthlings, and when the Federation looks to us again, they will see a world worth protecting. Caltrek stood just off camera, his hands clasped behind his back. His expression was unreadable, but his thoughts were not. The predators he'd warned of would see this broadcast too. And some of them, he knew, would not wait 5 years to test Earth's resolve. Chapter 5. Unity. The Return. Earth had not seen an arrival like this in all of recorded history. The Vorkyle emerged from the Alcubierre, fold high over the planet, its crescent hull spanning the distance between two city skylines, if it had been set down in a human metropolis. The spine lights pulsed in slow rhythm, each flash reflecting off the curve of Earth below like a heartbeat in the clouds. Flanking it were the USSF Resolute and her 4 Starlance interceptors, their sleek silhouettes dwarfed by the alien ship's bulk. Even from orbit, the difference in scale was humbling. President Hurlburt stood with Caltrek on the forward observation deck of the Resolute, both men watching the pale blue curve of Earth swell into view. Below them, the oceans glittered with sunbreaks. City clusters glowed faintly even in daylight. "They are watching us," Caltrek said quietly, silver flecks in his eyes catching the sunlight. "They've been watching since the broadcast," Hurlburt replied. "Now they'll see you in person. That will change everything." It already had. Across the planet, cameras tracked the Vorkile's descent into a high, geostationary orbit over the Atlantic. Entire cities came to a standstill. In Nairobi, workers poured out of office towers to point at the sky, their shouts mixing excitement and disbelief. In Sao Paulo, crowds filled the rooftops, cheering each time the alien ship's lights shifted color in the afternoon haze. In Moscow, the mood was more reserved. Military convoys moved quietly toward secure bunkers, while official state media alternated between praising the dawn of a new era and warning against cultural contamination. In Sydney, surfers sat straddling their boards far offshore, watching the alien silhouette pass across the midday sun. Not all reactions were joyful. In rural sectors of the American Midwest, hastily painted signs appeared along highways. "We don't kneel to aliens." In parts of Eastern Europe, religious processions marched through city streets, holding banners that proclaimed Earth was God's alone, yet in other places, college campuses, art districts, public squares, spontaneous celebrations broke out. Music, dancing, strangers embracing under the strange light of the alien vessel overhead. The global feeds were an unending loop, zoomed-in shots of the Vorkile's hull, expert panels dissecting Caltrek's previous statements, side-by-side graphics comparing the alien ship's size to human landmarks. Social media overflowed with both awe and paranoia, hashtags swinging wildly between #EarthRises and #NoFederation. Brian Baugh, watching from the Resolute's crew lounge, muttered to Harper, "Give it a week. Half of them will want to name a holiday after this. The other half will want to shoot it down." Harper didn't disagree. "The trick is keeping those halves from killing each other before we even get to the next step, the summit." The United Earth Diplomatic Complex had once been the United Nations headquarters in New York City. Now it was unrecognizable, its glass towers reinforced with composite armor, its subterranean levels expanded to hold secure hollow conference suites and command rooms, and its main assembly chamber retrofitted with Grogan technology that made the old translation headsets look like museum pieces. President Hurlburt entered the chamber, flanked by 2 Secret Service agents in discreet vacuum armor. Caltrek followed, his long stride drawing every eye in the room. Delegations from every recognized territory were already seated in the concentric tiers, their name placards replaced by simple population region identifiers: Americas, Eurasia, Pacifica, Africa's Middle Belt, Polars, Orbital, and Lunar settlements. The chatter died when Hurlburt reached the center podium. His voice carried not only through the chamber's amplified acoustics, but also via a Grogan translation lattice that rendered his words instantly in over 100 languages. "Fellow citizens of Earth," he began, "the presence of the Grogans above our skies is not a gesture. It is an invitation. But the Federation's conditions are clear. We cannot take our place among them as a divided world. We must decide now whether we will meet that challenge or watch opportunity pass us by." Caltrek stood silently behind him, his silver-flecked eyes scanning the chamber like a predator measuring prey. The first responses came quickly. The Africa's delegation spoke of the benefits: shared resources, equal standing with long dominant powers, access to Federation medical technology. For the first time in history, their envoy said, "No child in any village will be born into a forgotten place." The Eurasia delegation was more cautious, warning that too rapid unification could trigger instability in regions already under strain. "Our people fear being subsumed into a bureaucracy they cannot control," their envoy warned. The Orbital and Lunar settlements representative was blunt. "We've lived without Earth's direct oversight for decades. Joining the Federation under Earth's flag could strip the autonomy we fought to keep." Caltrek finally stepped forward, his voice calm but resonant. Your concerns are valid. But hear this. No Federation world has ever lost its cultural identity. You will keep your languages, your traditions, your art, your faith. What you must surrender are the rivalries that weaken you. Borders will mean nothing to those who would take your planet from you. And if you cannot present one voice, you will have no voice at all in the Council's chamber. The summit ran for days, each session a tug-of-war between caution and ambition. Breakout meetings formed in side chambers, where U.S. mediators shuttled between delegations, crafting frameworks for shared governance. Grogan aides moved quietly among the groups, clarifying Federation policy, diffusing misunderstandings before they became public spectacles. In the evenings, Caltrek met privately with Hurlbut, assessing which territories would align willingly and which would need to be brought along through political pressure or outright incentives. By the end of the week, the outlines of a new reality were emerging. Earth, as a single planetary entity, not a collection of competing states. The details were messy, the resistance loud, but the momentum was shifting. The birth of the United Earth Territories. It took 23 days of relentless negotiation. Some of those days ended in progress. A breakthrough clause here, a territorial concession there. Others ended in shouting matches, slammed doors, and hours of silence. Entire delegations threatened to walk more than once, forcing President Hurlbut's mediators to scramble to keep the fragile momentum from shattering. But on the morning of the 24th day, the chamber doors opened to the press. The world's feeds cut from war fronts, celebrity scandals, and market tickers to a single image, the flags of every former nation lowered together in the plaza outside the United Earth diplomatic complex. A single new banner rose in their place. White background, a deep blue circle at its center, patterned with a stylized map of Earth. No borders, no divisions. Around the circle, 12 silver stars, representing the founding territories. As the banner unfurled, the official announcement rang out in every major language. We, the citizens of Earth, united under one charter, proclaim the formation of the United Earth Territories. In the Assembly Chamber, President Hurlbut signed the charter first. One by one, the territorial envoys followed, their signatures projected in real time onto the massive holoscreens that lined the chamber walls. The charter itself was a hybrid of Earth legal tradition and Federation structural requirements, concise enough to be clear, robust enough to hold a planet together. Caltrek stood just behind the signing table, observing with the quiet intensity of a man who had seen this moment play out on a dozen other worlds. When the final envoy signed, he stepped forward and addressed the assembly. In this act, Caltrek said, his voice carrying easily in the hushed chamber, you take the first step toward joining the Federation of Planets. You are now, in the eyes of the galaxy, Earthlings first. Remember this in all you do, for the predators who wait beyond your skies will test that truth. The cheers outside the complex were deafening. In major cities, crowds poured into the streets, waving the new Earth banner, projecting it onto skyscrapers, painting it across plazas. On orbital platforms and lunar settlements, crews stopped work to gather around comm feeds, many raising their hands in salute. Not everyone celebrated. In rural and isolated regions, groups condemned the loss of national sovereignty, holding up the old flags and swearing never to recognize the new government. But their voices were small compared to the sheer scale of public approval. The era of the United Earth Territories had begun, the global constitution. The charter was only the skeleton. The real work came in the weeks that followed, as the delegates, now legislators of the United Earth Territories, began hammering out the flesh and blood of governance, the global constitution. It was modeled in many ways after the United States Constitution, but with input from legal scholars, cultural leaders, and even Grogan advisors who understood how interplanetary law would eventually intersect with Earth's. The framework was designed to be recognizable enough for existing governments to adapt to, but strong enough to withstand the political storms of merging billions of people under one system. The most controversial clause came early: mandatory personal armament. Every citizen over the age of 18 would be issued and required to carry a personal firearm. The weapons were standardized, sleek polymer sidearms chambered for electromagnetic projectiles, effective at short range, easy to maintain, and embedded with biometric safeties to prevent unauthorized use. The policy was meant to promote self-policing in territories far from central enforcement, and to prepare the population for a galaxy where armed defense was the norm. In the Federation, Caltrek explained, worlds were expected to be able to repel raids or hostile landings without relying solely on military intervention. The debates were fierce. Delegates from the Pacifica territory argued that arming civilians would inevitably lead to more violence, not less. Representatives from Africa's countered that local communities already practiced armed defense, and that a standardized, regulated system would save lives. The orbital and lunar settlements delegation pointed out that space-based habitats could be crippled by stray fire. They pushed for non-lethal variants for closed environments. In the end, the clause passed, with narrow amendments for non-lethal alternatives in certain high-risk infrastructure zones. Distribution began within days. Massive manufacturing contracts were awarded to both Earth-based and orbital arms fabricators. Local training centers sprang up everywhere, from city gyms to rural community halls, staffed by veterans and instructors vetted by the new Global Security Commission. Media feeds lit up with footage of long lines of citizens receiving their issued sidearms, some smiling proudly, others holding them at arm's length, as if the weapons might bite. Caltrek observed the process with the clinical eye of someone who had seen the difference between a prepared world and an unprepared one. "It is not the weapon that keeps a world safe," he told Herbert during one late-night strategy session. "It is the will of its people to stand together when the time comes to use it, resistance and the surge." The resistance came fast and loud. In the high deserts of the former American Southwest, entire enclaves declared they would never register their weapons with the Global Security Commission, flying old national flags from rooftop poles. In the Andes highlands, a coalition of rural communities refused delivery of the new standardized arms, calling the mandate alien law in human skin. On several Pacifica islands, protest banners stretched from one shoreline to the other, reading "Keep our skies ours." Some of the opposition was philosophical, some cultural, and some purely economic. Local gunsmiths worried they'd be driven out of business by mass-produced, government-issued sidearms. In the orbital and lunar settlements, engineers raised alarms about weapon discharges in closed habitats, even with non-lethal variants. But while the political and social pushback was noisy, it was not large enough to derail the momentum. Markets told the other half of the story. Global trade, freed from tariffs and border restrictions, surged to levels no one had projected this soon. Shipping companies that had once operated regionally now ran high-capacity orbital routes, moving goods in hours instead of weeks. Federated licensing standards meant a driver from Lagos could operate machinery in Seoul without retraining. Corporate conglomerates pivoted overnight. Agriculture giants merging across continents, tech firms pooling rand budgets to chase contracts that now had planetary reach. Even small businesses felt the lift. Artisans in Africa, selling directly to customers in Eastern Europe with no export fees. Lunar mining outfits partnering with South American refineries. The stock exchanges responded with a historic rally. The United Earth Credit, a new standardized currency backed by a hybrid of rare earth metals and Federation, recognized commodities, became the most stable in recorded history within its first month. The Grogans didn't miss this. Caltrek privately noted to Herbert that such an economic surge often drew the wrong kind of attention. "Prosperity is a beacon," he said, "and not all who see it will come to trade." Still, for most of the planet, the mood was optimistic. The twin realities of unity and opportunity were reshaping Earth faster than any war, any treaty, or any invention in history. Brian Baugh, speaking to Harper from his station back on Gliese, summed it up with his usual economy of words. "We're richer, louder, and better armed." Feels like the perfect recipe for trouble. Chapter 6. Shadows in the Stars. First contact, again. The Vorkyle's docking rings hummed with activity. President Herbert's diplomatic team had grown used to Grogan efficiency. Sterile halls, regimented schedules, precise ceremony. But this day carried a different energy. The air was warmer, the lights subtly brighter. There were more languages echoing through the chambers, some spoken, others projected telepathically into the minds of those present. Caltrek had arranged a carefully curated reception. The safest, he'd said, but not the tamest. The first to emerge was a tall, silver-skinned humanoid from the Zorath assembly, their form draped in a living cloak of motes that shifted color with their mood. They bowed low to the human delegation, their voice like chimes in a warm breeze. We welcomed the youngest voice to the oldest conversation. Next came a delegation from the Vren Collective, a species of broad-shouldered reptilian bipeds, armor seemingly grown from their own scaled bodies. Their leader clapped Hurlbut on the shoulder hard enough to stagger him. "Strength is respected," he growled in accented English. "Show it, and your enemies will think twice." Other allies followed, the insectoid Trelashi, whose intricate faceplates clicked softly in greeting, the soft-bodied Mirans, whose glowing tendrils moved in slow, deliberate patterns of welcome. For Earth's leaders, the moment was overwhelming. For Brian Baugh, watching from Gliese, it was sobering. Each species represented centuries of survival in a galaxy where survival was not guaranteed. The doubt behind the welcome. The welcome ceremonies ended in applause and diplomatic handshakes, but the closed-door sessions told another story. Inside the Vorkal's council chamber, the air was heavy with unspoken judgment. Federation delegates sat in a half-circle of elevated seats, their features lit by the blue-white glow of the central holo projector. The Earth delegation, Hurlbut, his advisors, and a few hand-picked military liaisons, stood on the lower floor, like defendants awaiting a verdict. A tall, avian-faced delegate from the Tala Dominion spoke first, her feathers puffed in irritation. "Earth is a child playing with fire," she said through a translator node. "You've barely stepped off your world, yet you arm every citizen as if preparing for war. That is not peace, that is fear." A Zorath representative countered gently. "Fear can be the seed of caution, and caution, the seed of survival." Others weighed in. The Miran envoy spoke in slow, rippling patterns that the translator struggled to keep up with. "Humanity burns bright, too bright. Some in the Federation wonder if that light will warm, or scorch." Hurlbut responded with his usual blend of diplomacy and iron. "Madam and sirs," he said, addressing the semicircle, "if the Federation waited for perfection, there would be no Federation. Earth has unified. We are arming ourselves to protect our people, not to threaten yours. We've been here before. We know what conflict costs." Caltrek, standing just off to the side, studied the room. He didn't speak, didn't need to. The slight narrowing of his luminous eyes told Brian, watching remotely from Gliese, exactly what he was thinking. The Federation's welcome was conditional. And conditions could be withdrawn. The mines in the dark. The USSF Horizon's Edge was a recon vessel designed for long, silent patrols, its black composite hull swallowing light, its engines whisper quiet in the void. For 3 weeks, she'd been mapping asteroid belts and mineral-rich planetoids on the fringe of the Gliese system, far beyond the primary shipping lanes. On day 23, her passive scanners caught a flicker. Not a natural anomaly, not debris. A deliberate energy pulse, short and tight, like a heartbeat. Lieutenant Commander Ayanna Cross, captain of the Horizon's Edge, brought the ship in low, along the shadow of an asteroid the size of Manhattan. The ship's optical drones crept forward, their feed bleeding into her command chair display. What emerged from the darkness made her skin crawl. A sprawling mining rig clung to the surface of a metallic planetoid, its arms boring deep into the rock with a steady, predatory rhythm. Massive cargo pods, unmarked, unregistered, floated in a loose formation nearby, each one big enough to hold a city block's worth of raw ore. The design was unmistakably alien, jagged, asymmetrical, with glowing crimson vent lines that pulsed in a way no Federation engineering ever used. Cross switched to encrypted channel. This is Horizon's Edge to Gliese Command. We have active extraction operations at Grid Delta 94. Structure is non-Federation. Repeat, non-Federation. In the control center on Gliese, Brian Baugh felt his stomach tighten. "Any life signs?" "Scattered," Cross replied. "Hard to read, could be shielded. But, Commander, they're stripping this rock bare. No permits, no beacon, and they've got automated guns tracking our movement." Brian didn't need the rest spelled out. These weren't guests, they were thieves. The warning. The Vorkyle's observation deck was a cathedral of glass and alien alloy, its panoramic view swallowing half the Gliese system in a single sweep. Brian Baugh stood with his hands clasped behind his back, watching the faint glint of the horizon's edge as it returned from the outer rim. Caltrek joined him without sound. No footsteps, just the faint rustle of his long ceremonial mantle. His reflection in the glass was as imposing as ever, but his tone was quieter now, almost personal. "You have seen them," Caltrek said, not as a question. Brian nodded. "They don't belong to the Federation." "No," the Grogan replied. "They belong to no one but themselves, and that is the danger." Brian studied his alien counterpart. "Then why hasn't the Federation acted?" "This is your system too." Caltrek's luminous eyes flicked toward him. "Because this is not Grogan territory. And because the Federation is bound by its own laws, a slow machine in a fast galaxy." He stepped closer to the glass, his gaze fixed on the faint shimmer of distant mining lasers. "There are species in this galaxy who will never wait for permission. They will not speak before taking. They will not ask before claiming. They will not stop unless forced to stop." Brian felt the words settle like a weight in his chest. "You think they'll come here?" Caltrek finally turned to face him. "They already have." For a moment, the only sound was the soft hum of the ship's life support. Then the Grogan added, "Prepare your people, Commander. You may have joined a wider world, but the wider world is not yet your friend." Chapter 7. The Inmate Uprising. Sparks in the dark. The Gliese 667C mining complex was never meant to be beautiful. Its corridors were utilitarian, all exposed conduits, reinforced bulkheads, and the constant rumble of ore processors chewing rock into dust. The air smelled faintly of iron and machine oil, what passed for fresh in a place like this. The inmate program had been running for 8 years without a large-scale incident. There had been scuffles, of course, smuggling, gambling, the occasional fight over rations, but nothing like this. Nothing coordinated. The first signs came at shift change in Sector E-12, a docking bay where transports ferried processed ore to orbital refineries. Routine checks showed 3 work crews missing from their stations. By the time security drones arrived, the bay doors had been locked from the inside, and all cameras were black. Brian Baugh got the call while in the command hub, mid-briefing with his senior officers. "Commander," the security chief's voice crackled through, "we've got an armed lockdown in E-12. Multiple hostiles. They're moving toward the shuttle access points." The phrase "armed lockdown" hit like a hammer. Inmates weren't supposed to have weapons, at least not firearms. Brian didn't waste a breath. "Seal all egress routes to orbit. Activate internal partition seals on E-block. And get me a visual feed. Anything still working." The feed came from a single maintenance bot that had been hiding under a conveyor. The grainy video showed men and women in orange and grey jumpsuits, their faces hard, carrying rifles that looked too new to be cobbled together from mining gear. They weren't running. They were moving with purpose. The thin line between order and slaughter. The thump of boots on metal grating echoed through the central causeway as the Space Force Marines geared up. The smell of gun oil and polymer plating hung in the air. Brian led from the front, helmet under his arm, his voice carrying over the clatter. "No lethal force unless absolutely necessary. I want control, not a massacre." "Clear." A chorus of "aye." Sir rippled down the line, but Brian could see the tension in their eyes. These weren't Federation-trained diplomats. They were soldiers stationed on a raw world at the edge of human expansion. Many had done tours in hostile zones back on Earth. The team split into 3 strike elements. Alpha Team would breach from the North Maintenance Tunnel. Bravo Team would come in through the upper catwalk above the docking bay. Command Team, Brian's unit, would move up the main corridor, drawing attention and negotiating if possible. The corridor leading to E-12 was already scarred from the uprising. Doors blown by makeshift charges, scorch marks from energy bursts. The sound of distant shouting and the hiss of venting steam created a strange battlefield ambience. As they neared the bay, 3 inmates rounded the corner, rifles up. "Drop it!" Brian's voice was a bark of command. 2 froze, but the third, a wiry man with tattoos winding up his neck, swung his rifle toward Bravo's position above. Brian didn't think. He fired once, catching the man in the shoulder. The inmate went down screaming, weapon clattering to the floor. The other two dropped theirs immediately. Marines swept forward, zip-tying their wrists and hauling them out of the line of fire. Alpha Team's det charges blew the maintenance hatch inward. The bay erupted in chaos, shouted orders, the clatter of dropped tools, and the crack of gunfire echoing off the steel walls. Brian and command team poured in through the main corridor. The scene was a mix of desperation and defiance. Armed inmates using cargo crates as barricades, others shouting for surrender. Some fired wildly, their shots sparking off the Marines' shields. Brian activated his suit comm. All units, suppressing fire only, pushed them back to the shuttle alcove. It worked, slowly. Inch by inch, the Marines advanced, shields up, pulse rifles set to stun. Several inmates dropped where they stood, twitching from the shock rounds, while others surrendered as the net tightened. One inmate, a woman with close-cropped hair and a miner's build, stepped forward from behind the barricades, holding a crude loudhailer. "Baugh, we're not your slaves. You let us out, or we burn every ship in this dock." Brian stepped clear of cover, visor up, voice steady but cold. "You burn those ships, no one leaves this rock. Not you, not us. Stand down, and I'll make sure you get heard. Keep pushing, and you'll just be another name in a file marked closed." There was a long silence, broken only by the hum of the overhead lights. Then her rifle clattered to the deck. The rest followed, threads in the ashes. The docking bay was a mess of toppled cargo crates, scattered tools, and the acrid tang of spent energy cells. Medics moved among the fallen, sorting the stunned from the injured, binding wounds and hauling the unconscious to holding cells. Brian stood with his helmet tucked under his arm, watching as the last zip ties clicked shut. A tech sergeant approached, a sealed evidence container in his hands. "Sir, you're going to want to see this." Inside were 3 rifles, sleek, alien alloy frames with no Earth manufacturer's mark. Their power cells were crystalline, glowing faintly blue even when powered down. "These aren't from our armories," the sergeant said. "They're not from any USSF depot either. Hell, they're not human manufacture." The first round of inmate questioning was the usual mix of bravado and lies. "We found them in a shipment crate. They were here when we got assigned. Some guy traded them for gold dust. Never got his name. But the woman with the loudhailer, name Rena Voss, was different. She didn't bluff. They came in on a supply hauler 3 weeks ago, same one that's been running ore out past the agreed lanes. We figured they were Federation buyers, maybe smugglers. Didn't matter. We were tired of waiting for our 5 years to end." Brian's jaw tightened. Smugglers didn't usually risk bringing contraband to a US-controlled penal colony. Not unless someone was paying them very, very well. In the USSF command hub, techs worked on disassembling the captured rifles. Under the polymer plating of one, etched so faintly it could only be seen under polarized scan, was a sequence of alien glyphs. Caltrek appeared on the secure hololink the moment Brian sent the scan. His expression, even through distortion, was grim. "These are Vulcan make. Independent weapons traders. Dangerous. They have no allegiance to the Federation. They sell to whoever can pay. Miners, warlords, or worse." Brian remembered the mining rig from the reconnaissance report, the one Caltrek had warned about. "You're telling me they're the same ones working that planetoid?" The Grogan didn't hesitate. "Yes. And if they are arming your criminals, they are probing your defenses." Brian turned back to the bay's viewport. Beyond it, Gliese's horizon curved in pale orange against the black. Somewhere out there, a group of unknown aliens had just tested how quickly they could get weapons into his colony. It wasn't a revolt anymore. It was a warning shot, the tightening net. The command hub's lights were dimmed to night mode, the consoles glowing in shades of blue and amber. Outside the panoramic viewport, Gliese 667C's thin clouds rolled slowly across a copper sky, the horizon lined with jagged ridges of raw, unclaimed territory. Brian stood over the central hollow table, the captured rifles hovering as detailed 3D projections above its surface. Caltrek's image shimmered beside him. The Grogan's massive frame hunched forward in an almost predatory posture. "You need to understand, Commander," Caltrek said. "The Vulcan don't just trade. They scout, they test, they slip into your territory, plant the seeds of instability, and watch how you respond." The weapons were bait. And the uprising was your reaction time. Brian's mind ran the timeline. 3 weeks since the supposed supply hauler docked. 2 weeks since the reconnaissance ship spotted unregistered mining. 8 days since security anomalies started popping in the work program logs. This wasn't random, it was layered. Lock down all external docking clearances, Brian told his operations officer. Any ship requesting access to Gliese gets a full triple check against Federation registries. If they don't match, they don't land. He tapped the comms console. Deploy 2 recon drones to the outer belt, near that Vorkan rig. Passive scans only. I want to know who they're talking to, and what's coming or going. Caltrek gave a low, rumbling note that Brian had learned meant approval. I will also send Grogan patrol craft to your system's perimeter. They will remain cloaked. The Vorkan will not detect them easily. Later that night, Brian stood alone in his quarters. The low hum of the habitat systems the only sound. On the desk before him was a simple datapad, its display showing the day's report in cold military precision. 1. 27 inmates detained. 2. 0 fatalities. 3. 9 non-critical injuries. 4. 3 alien-manufactured rifles, verified Vorkan origin. The numbers were clean, the reality wasn't. If the Vorkan could smuggle arms into a maximum security colony on a planet 4 light-years from Earth, they could do it anywhere. Somewhere, in the black between the stars, there were species who didn't need to knock before they entered. And Brian Baugh had just heard their fist on the door. As the night cycle settled over the colony, a single glint of metal moved along the shadow of an asteroid in the outer belt. It wasn't one of Brian's drones. It wasn't Grogan. It was something else. Its hull patterns fractal and shifting, like it was wearing a disguise even in the vacuum. The ship adjusted its trajectory slightly toward Gliese 667c before vanishing into the asteroid field once more. The net was tightening. But who was catching whom was still in question. Chapter 8. Guns and Diplomacy. The firearm mandates ripple. It started quietly. Not with a bang, not with a sweeping parade of armed citizens, but with the almost casual deliveries of black polymer cases to every post office and distribution hub on Earth. Each case bore the new seal of the United Earth Territories, the familiar outline of the planet, ringed by a stylized olive branch and star. Inside each, a sidearm. Standardized, easy to maintain, chambered in a round chosen more for reliability than stopping power. Alongside it, a pamphlet, Citizen Defense, your duty, your right. The first week, the mood was strange but manageable. Citizens collected their weapons like they were picking up new driver's licenses, some with curiosity, others with unease, a few with the quiet thrill of newfound authority. By the third week, the streets felt different. People moved with a certain watchfulness. Small-town shop owners now kept their holstered pistols visible on the counter beside the register. College students debated ballistics over coffee. In the cities, the culture split fast. Some neighborhoods held firearm safety festivals. Others staged protests in public squares, waving banners that read "No gun, no peace." The new economy. The economic shift came faster than even the planners in Hurlburt's administration predicted. Gun ranges multiplied overnight. Ammunition factories ran 3 shifts. Training instructors who'd been making modest livings suddenly found themselves booked months out. But where there was new supply, there was new demand, and new opportunity for those operating outside the law. It started with whispers of weapons modification shops in the alleyways of Jakarta, Nairobi, and Sao Paulo. Then came the raids. Entire warehouses stacked floor to ceiling with stolen sidearms, smuggled Federation tech bolted crudely to their frames. The weapons were finding their way to people who weren't supposed to have them, black market trade networks so efficient they spanned continents. On Gliese 667c, Brian Baugh's reports reflected the same problem. The mandated weapons for miners, meant for self-defense against environmental threats or animal attacks, were showing up in the hands of unregistered workers and, occasionally, in the hands of smugglers off-world. Cultural splits. For some, the firearm was a badge of equality, a leveling tool in a world where the strongest nation on Earth no longer existed, only territories. For others, it was a wedge, a reminder that peace was being enforced, not grown. The Grogans, ever watchful, began compiling cultural analysis reports. In one, a Grogan sociologist wrote, "Earth's species now walks armed into every conversation. They do not yet understand how this changes the conversation itself." The Federation Security Council debate. The chamber of the Federation Security Council was vast enough to swallow an entire Earth stadium, its domed ceiling lined with slow-moving light patterns that shifted in rhythm with the ambient translation pulses. The air shimmered faintly, the byproduct of layered atmospheric controls, each species present breathing their own optimal mix of gases. Caltrek stood at the center dais, towering over most of the delegates, his silver-blue scales glinting under the chamber's recessed lighting. Around him, representatives of more than 36 species sat in tiered rings, their forms as varied as their worlds, furred, feathered, scaled, bioluminescent. Some whispered through tendrils, others spoke through harmonics that rippled the air. The holographic display above the dais showed a rotating 3D model of Earth. Superimposed over it were data streams, firearm production rates, training completion percentages, incident reports, and, in bold crimson, the exponential curve of black market trafficking incidents. The accusation, a delegate from the Yerathi, an insectoid race with chitin plates and multifaceted eyes, raised her forelimbs. "This is not a defensive measure," she clicked. Her voice filtered into the universal translator. "This is mobilization. A species arming itself not against its own internal threats, but in preparation for outward aggression." Murmurs rippled across the tiers. The Vorkan representative, a tall, almost eel-like figure in a shimmering pressure suit, leaned forward, voice smooth and slow. "Whether they admit it or not, the humans know they are surrounded by stronger powers. They arm because they fear. And fear turns quickly into preemptive action." Caltrek's gaze shifted between the speakers, his own talons curling against the smooth surface of the dais. "Fear," he said, his deep voice rumbling through the chamber, "is not unique to humans. But we must be clear. Arming one's citizens can strengthen defense or destabilize the balance of power, the defense of humanity. From the second tier, the Selhari representative, a being of translucent skin and fluid-like veins that pulsed gently, raised both elongated arms. The humans have unified for the first time in their history. To dismiss this as a march toward war is to ignore the scale of their achievement. Their firearm mandate may be crude by Federation standards, but it has reduced internal crime, increased local enforcement, and stabilized their economic output. Let us not condemn progress, because it does not look like our own. Caltrek let the room settle. "And yet," he continued, "we must watch carefully. If they begin to export their weapons, or develop technology capable of challenging established security norms, the Federation will be forced to act the quiet vote." No formal resolution passed that day. The council chambers emptied slowly, conversations trailing in whispers and coded gestures, but the security network tightened around the Sol system. Patrol routes were quietly shifted, listening arrays recalibrated. The humans might not have been told directly, but the Federation had moved them one step closer to the watch list. A file in the archives marked potential aggressor. Pressure on President Herbert. The Oval Office had changed since the United Earth Territories came into being. The old paintings of Founding Fathers were gone, replaced by a panoramic hollow window showing a live feed of the North American eastern seaboard from orbit, sunlight gleaming off the curvature of the Earth. The flag behind the desk was no longer stars and stripes, but a deep blue field with a single silver ring encircling the planet's outline. President Michael Herbert stood with his hands clasped behind his back, watching the hollow feed as if the image might blink and show him something new. Across from him, the Defense Committee's hardline faction had gathered. Men and women in pressed uniforms, civilian advisors in immaculate suits, all with the same urgent, tight expressions. The argument for action. General Reed, the Space Force's operations chief, leaned forward over the conference table. "Mr. President, the reports from Commander Baugh are clear. These rogue miners are not acting alone. Someone is supplying them, someone off-world. If they consolidate a foothold in Gliese, we lose control of the mines, and with it, our leverage in the system. A senator from the Pacific Territories tapped her tablet, throwing up a 3D map of Gliese's mining sector. Our recon assets have already spotted at least one unidentified freighter making regular runs in and out of the system. This isn't just smuggling, it's staging. The longer we wait, the more entrenched they become. Another voice, colder, came from a former intelligence director now serving as National Security Advisor. With respect, Mr. President, we are already behind. The Federation sees us as a fledgling power. If we want them to take us seriously, or to leave us alone, we need to show strength. That means preemptive strikes on the smuggler bases. Hard and fast. The counterpoint. Hurlbut turned from the window slowly. Strength, he said, isn't just about firing first. You think the Federation will ignore us hitting targets before we know exactly who they belong to. If those smugglers are tied to a Federation member, we've just bought ourselves a war we can't win. The room went quiet, but not in agreement. General Reed broke the silence. Sir, if we wait for certainty, we might not get a chance to act at all. The private warning. Later that night, in the secure comms room, Hurlbut took a private call from Caltrek. The Grogan's massive head filled the screen, eyes glinting like polished stone. President Hurlbut, Caltrek rumbled. If you strike now, without cause the Federation deems legitimate, there will be consequences. Not from the rogue miners, from the Council itself. Some species do not need much reason to act against an upstart world. Hurlbut rubbed his temples. And if we don't strike? Caltrek's expression was unreadable. Then you risk losing what you've built before you have the strength to keep it. Choose carefully. Earth's next step may decide how long it remains. In the game, the long night. President Hurlbut didn't go home that night. The White House, what was left of it after its transformation into the UAT Capitol complex, had quarters for him on the top floor, but he couldn't bring himself to retreat there. Instead, he stayed in the command balcony of the Orbital Oversight Chamber, a glass-walled platform that jutted out over the massive operations floor below. From up here, Earth looked like a jewel in the dark, its lights blinking in slow rhythm as storms rolled over the continents. The view was beautiful and deceptive. From this distance there were no borders, no protests, no black market traffickers slipping illegal weapons into alien hands. Just a world that looked whole. The weight of the decision. Hurlbut paced the balcony slowly, his hands clasped behind his back, the low hum of the station's life support systems filling the silence. On the surface, his decision seemed simple, strike or hold. But nothing was simple anymore. If he ordered the preemptive strikes the hardliners wanted, he'd send a message to the Federation, to the rogue miners, to the people of Earth. But it wouldn't just be a message of strength. It would be a declaration that Earth's new unity was backed by the willingness to fire first, to act without proof, that could burn the fragile trust Caltrek had fought to give them. If he held back, the miners and their suppliers would dig in deeper, and when the time came to remove them, it would cost more lives, maybe more than they could afford to lose. And the hardliners, they'd start seeing him as weak. Weak presidents didn't last long in politics, especially in a united world that was still learning what that unity meant. The visitor. The door behind him hissed open. Brian Baugh stepped in, still in his black Space Force field jacket, boots leaving faint tracks of Gliese dust on the polished deck. He gave the president a crisp nod before joining him at the glass. Sir, Brian said quietly, the latest recon pass shows 3 new ships at the miners' staging area. No registry, no transponder. They're hiding something, and they're not afraid we'll find it. Hurlbut didn't look away from the planet. And your recommendation? Brian hesitated, his voice carrying the weight of a man who'd fought enough battles to know there were no clean victories. If you want to hold Gliese, we hit them now. But if you want Earth in the Federation, we wait. You can't do both at once. The insomnia hour. Long after Brian left, Hurlbut remained. His reflection in the glass stared back at him. A man who, only a year ago, had been a consensus builder, a diplomat. Now he was being asked to decide between 2 futures that both had a cost measured in lives. He thought of Caltrek's warning. He thought of the council chambers filled with species who would watch his every move. And he thought of the people back home, farmers in the former Midwest who had never heard of Gliese 667C, miners whose shifts ended with the alien sunset, students now practicing weapons drills between history lessons. Somewhere deep inside, the answer was forming. Not the answer he wanted, but the one he could live with. Dawn, when the first light from Sol crested the horizon of Earth, flooding the balcony in pale gold, Hurlbut finally turned from the glass. He didn't feel rested or resolved, but he knew that by the end of the day, one of two orders would be given, and history would pivot on which one it was. Chapter 9. The Rogue War. The Skirmish Line. The first alert came in while Brian Baugh was halfway through a briefing with the Grogan envoys, a soft chime in his earpiece, followed by the clipped voice of Lieutenant Mara Chen from Orbital Control. "Commander, we have multiple distress calls from Mining Sector 9. One tug vessel's lost main propulsion. Drones destroyed in belt coordinates Kappa 17 through Kappa 22. Unknown contacts in the area." Brian didn't look at Caltrek, though he felt the Grogan's heavy gaze on him. "Put it on the main screen," he ordered. The holotable in the center of the command chamber shimmered to life, replacing political charts with a stark tactical display. Bright green icons marked Earth's patrol ships and civilian mining craft. 3 new red signatures blinked in among the asteroid cluster, darting in unpredictable arcs. The overlay tagged them as unknown, no registry match. Chen's voice stayed calm but clipped. "Patrol ship USV Grant is moving to intercept. USV Hayworth is 3 minutes out. Commander, their energy readings are high, possibly shielded." Brian leaned forward. "Weapon status?" "Confirmed, sir. Particle lancers and hull disruptors. And," Chen hesitated, "their targeting scanners are hot. Engagement in the belt." Out in the black, the Grant and Hayworth closed in on the rogue vessels, their drives painting the dust-choked asteroid field with ghost light. Inside Grant's bridge, Captain Elias Stone barked maneuver orders as asteroid fragments scraped against the magnetic shielding. The lead rogue vessel broke formation first, sweeping in a tight arc around a tumbling rock the size of a cathedral. A beam of emerald light cut across the void, striking a mining drone and vaporizing it in a silent bloom of plasma. "Return fire," Stone ordered. 2 lances of white-blue energy snapped from Grant's forward batteries, shearing across the rogue's port flank. Shields flared, then dimmed. Not a kill, but a message. The asteroid belt became a twisting maze, each ship weaving through debris, using chunks of ancient rock for cover. The Hayworth joined the fight, raking the second rogue with railgun bursts that pinged against shield harmonics. Inside USV Grant, alarms blared. The third rogue vessel had broken past their line, making for the crippled tug. "Grant to Baugh." Stone's voice came over the encrypted channel, taut with urgency. "We can't cover them all. We're stretched," the realization. Brian's eyes narrowed as he watched the red blips move. Too coordinated, too purposeful. "They're not random raiders," he murmured. "They're clearing a path to something. Or someone." Caltrek stepped closer, his deep voice resonating. "Commander Baugh, this pattern is military in origin. These are not miners defending themselves. They are staging tests of your response times." Brian tapped the table. "Mara, patch me to Hayworth. Have them shadow the lead vessel, but do not destroy it. I want them alive." Caltrek's crest feathers lifted slightly, a Grogan sign of unease. "If you take prisoners, the Federation will ask questions you may not wish to answer." Brian didn't blink. "If we don't, the rogue miners will keep testing us until they find a gap. We need to know who's backing them." Fallout. By the time the skirmish ended, one rogue vessel was crippled and drifting, its engines cold. The other 2 had melted back into the asteroid shadows, vanishing into regions Earth patrols couldn't chase without violating the mining safety accord. Hours later, Federation envoys were already filing inquiries. Article 4 of the Federation Peace Accord. Unsanctioned warfare was a violation that could see Earth barred from membership before the ink on its provisional agreements was dry. Brian stood at the viewport of Atlas Station, watching the wreck of the captured rogue ship being towed toward a secure dock. Somewhere inside that gutted hull were answers. But he could already feel the noose tightening, both politically and militarily. Caltrek joined him at the glass. "Your enemy knows the rules you must follow," he said softly. "That is why they have chosen this game." Brian didn't answer. Not yet. Because deep down he knew that to win, they might have to break the rules entirely. The noose tightens. By the time Brian's shuttle touched down on Atlas Station's primary concourse, the political storm had already reached Earth. The secure comm lines in his wrist terminal were stacked with encrypted messages, each stamped Priority 1 in the deep crimson of United Earth Territory security clearance. The first came from President Hurlburt himself. No preamble, no pleasantries. From Michael Hurlburt, President of the United Earth Territories. Subject: immediate response required. Text: Federation Council has convened emergency session regarding skirmish in Kepperbelt. Article 4 violations being discussed. You are ordered to brief via secure link in 30 minutes. Be prepared to account for all actions. Crisis call. 30 minutes later, Brian was standing in the secure conference chamber, the curved wall around him alive with 6 holographic windows, President Hurlburt, the Secretary of Space Defense, and 4 Federation Council envoys. The human faces were drawn tight, the alien faces inscrutable. The lead envoy, a Sorin named Halvek, spoke first. Commander Baugh, Federation intelligence confirmed your vessels engaged in unsanctioned armed conflict within Gliese 667C's asteroid belt. This constitutes a violation of provisional accession protocols. Hurlburt's jaw was set in granite. Our ships were defending civilian mining operations from attack. That's not war. That's self-defense. Halvek's translucent crest rippled, a Sorin sign of skepticism. Self-defense is valid when the attacker's origin is known. Your adversaries are not registered members of any recognized species alliance. You escalated before confirming intent. Brian stepped forward, his voice low but steady. We didn't escalate. We responded. And if we hadn't, you'd be reviewing the wreckage of a civilian tug with 22 human crew aboard. The chamber fell silent. But the point had landed. Only partially. A private warning. After the call, Caltrek appeared in Brian's quarters without formal announcement, as Grogan's often did when the matter was urgent. The Council is not unified, Caltrek said. There are factions who already doubt Earth's readiness for Federation integration. This incident is fuel for them. Brian rubbed a hand over his face. Let me guess. Sanctions? Caltrek inclined his head. At minimum, expulsion from provisional status is possible if they perceive your actions as an intentional act of war. Against who? Brian asked. These rogues aren't even on your records. That, Caltrek said, is the problem. His gaze hardened. And I believe I know why. Intel drop. Later that evening, Brian met with Grogan Intelligence Officer Krevek in a soundproof chamber deep in the station's security wing. Krevek activated a holofeed showing the rogue ships from the skirmish, only this time their silhouettes were overlaid with schematics. These ships are civilian in hull only, Krevek said. Their power cores are modified with technology consistent with Jatari design, a non-Federation species known for strip mining contested systems. Brian studied the specs. And let me guess, they don't wait for permission. They take, Krevek said simply. They take until nothing remains. The decision point. The intel was damning, but it also left Earth in a bind. Federation law was clear. Any military action against a non-member species without prior authorization could be deemed unlawful aggression. But waiting for council deliberations could take months, more than enough time for the Jatari-backed rogues to dismantle half the Gliese mining network. Brian stood in Hurlburt's private comm room, the president's face lit by the shifting blues of the intel display. So we're trapped, Hurlburt said. If we move, we risk losing our seat before we even get it. If we wait, they gut the system. Brian's voice was firm. There's a third option. We hit them where it hurts, but off the books. No flags, no traceable weapons, just ships that mysteriously go dark. Hurlburt's eyes narrowed. You're proposing a ghost strike. Brian nodded once. Exactly. And in that moment, the decision was made, though neither man said it aloud. Ghost strike. The mission wasn't on any roster, and the ships didn't exist. Not officially. In reality, they were a hybrid of Grogan engineering and human ingenuity. 3 matte black interceptors with hull coatings that devoured light, leaving only faint distortions in the starfield behind them. Their drives ran on Grogan phase shift cores, making their heat signatures nearly invisible to conventional sensors. Brian Baugh walked the length of the hangar, his boots clicking on the deck plating. The crews were already moving with quiet efficiency. No shouting, no chatter, just the steady hum of final systems checks. "This is Atlas Unit 1, Brian said to the assembled operators. "You're here because you know how to keep your mouth shut and your aim steady. The targets are rogue vessels operating in the Kappa Belt with Jatari tech. No Federation oversight, no official kill orders. If anyone asks where you were tonight, you were in your quarters sleeping off a bad ration pack." The team chuckled quietly, the tension breaking just enough. Caltrek's contribution. Caltrek emerged from the shadows near the far wall, flanked by 2 Grogan specialists in crimson armor. "I'm assigning my best disruptor pilot to you," he said, gesturing to a tall, silver-feathered Grogan female who stepped forward. "Her name is Rhys. She can disable a power core without touching the bridge. That may be useful if you still cling to your human aversion to unnecessary killing." Brian gave a short nod. "We're here to end the threat, not start a war." Caltrek tilted his head. "Sometimes those are the same thing. Into the belt." The interceptors launched without ceremony, slingshotting around Gliese's third moon before disappearing into the shadow of the Kappa Belt. Inside the cockpit of Atlas I, Brian sat alongside Rhys, his eyes locked on the HUD as they threaded through asteroid debris. The belt was alive with movement, not just rocks, but ships. The rogues were exactly where Krevek's intel had placed them. 3 Jatari-modified miners clustered around a massive iron-rich asteroid, drills chewing through its surface, while escort craft circled. Brian toggled the squad channel. No lights, no open comms, targets marked Alpha through Gamma. "We go in sequence. Alpha first. Rhys, you're up. Precision strikes." From the co-pilot seat, Rhys worked the disruptor controls with surgical precision. A pulse of invisible energy rippled across the void, brushing the Alpha ship's hull. Its lights flickered, engines sputtered, then died. The vessel began to drift, powerless. "Atlas II, move," Brian ordered. The second interceptor slid into position and fired a pair of electromagnetic penetrators, knocking out the escort's targeting systems before they could react. The fight was over before it began, and that was the point. The rogues couldn't call for help, couldn't prove who hit them. Within 30 minutes, all 3 target vessels were adrift, their cores fried, and their comrades severed. The disappearing act. Rhys leaned back, her crest feathers relaxing. "They will be found eventually, but without propulsion, they are little more than rocks." Brian checked the tactical display. "Good. Let's make sure we're not here when they are." The interceptors turned and slipped back into the belt's labyrinth, their phase shift drives masking them as nothing more than background noise. No trophies, no salvage, just ghosts leaving ghosts behind. Aftermath? Hours later, Atlas -1 docked silently at an unlisted hangar bay deep in the underbelly of Atlas Station. There were no debriefs, no records, only a short exchange between Brian and Hurlburt over a secure, encrypted channel. "Hurlburt, did it work?" "Baugh, they won't be mining Gliese anytime soon." "Hurlburt and the Federation." "Baugh, they'll never know." Caltrek's voice cut in from the side of the room. "The question is not whether they know. It is whether the Jatari will let this insult pass unanswered." Brian didn't respond, because in his gut he already knew the answer. The reckoning. The official report from Atlas Station was thin. 3 rogue mining vessels in the Kappa Belt had suffered catastrophic systems failure during operations. No survivors were reported, no salvage recovered. The cause was listed as environmental factors consistent with high-density asteroid debris. On paper, it was just another hazard of working deep space. Off paper, the ripples began almost immediately. Suspicion in the Federation. 2 days later, Federation Council Session, 1983C, convened in closed chambers. Brian wasn't present. Humans weren't invited. But Caltrek had someone in the room. When he briefed Brian afterward, his tone was carefully measured. "Certain council members," Caltrek said, "find the timing of the mining vessel's failure convenient. They question how, with the entire belt being surveyed by your forces, such incidents could occur without intervention." Brian leaned back in his chair. "Do they have proof Caltrek's mouth curved in what passed for a Grogan smile. No. But proof is rarely required for suspicion to grow, the Jatari reaction. That suspicion became dangerous when the first encrypted transmission arrived from beyond Federation relay space. It wasn't sent to the Federation. It was sent directly to Earth. The message was short, in heavily degraded translation. We know your shadow ships. We will take your stones. And your blood. It was unsigned, but the power signature embedded in the data was pure Jatari. Pressure from above. President Hurlburt's face was grim on the secure hololink. They know it was us, Brian. No one else has Grogan-assisted phase shift drives except us, and the Grogans. We left nothing behind, Brian said. Doesn't matter. They've decided it was us, which means they'll respond. Caltrek's hologram appeared beside the president, uninvited but impossible to ignore. The Jatari will not engage in open war. They will send privateers, raiders. It will not be your warships they target. It will be your civilians, the quiet preparations. Brian spent the next 72 hours in the war room, running simulations and drafting contingency plans. If the Jatari struck the outer colonies, it would be weeks before Federation security could be mobilized. That left Earth's fledgling space defense to stand alone, unless they bent the rules again and staged preemptive strikes. The idea was tempting, but it was also the exact behavior the Federation feared from a militarized Earth. As Brian watched the tactical hologram shift and flicker, he knew they'd crossed an invisible line the moment Atlas Unit 1 launched. The rogues had been just the beginning. The closing thought. Caltrek found him in the observation deck, staring out at Gliese's distant sun. You fight like a predator, the Grogan said. Swift, decisive. But predators make enemies quickly. Brian didn't look away from the stars. Then maybe it's time we learn to be something more than predators. Caltrek's gaze followed his. Perhaps. But first you must survive the ones already hunting you. The words lingered long after the Grogan left. Because in his gut, Brian knew the next move wasn't his to make. Chapter 10. The Trial of Earth. The Convocation. The Federation Assembly Hall was unlike anything Brian Baugh had ever seen, and he'd seen more alien architecture in the last year than most humans could imagine in a lifetime. The chamber floated in a zero-gravity shell within the orbital station known as Clintar Spire, a Grogan-constructed neutral platform used for the most critical diplomatic meetings. From the outside, the spire was a silver and violet dagger hanging in the void above Federation Core World 6. From the inside, the assembly hall looked like a cathedral designed by 1,000 different species. Every wall, dais, and beam fused together in a mosaic of cultures. Columns twisted like the double helices of DNA, their surfaces inlaid with glowing circuitry. The ceiling wasn't a ceiling at all, but a transparent energy membrane showing the swirl of a nearby gas giant below, its storms casting slow, shifting shadows across the delegates. Brian stood at the rear of the chamber, flanked by 2 Grogan guards. It wasn't that he wasn't allowed closer. Technically, as Earth's military envoy, he had floor privileges. But this was Caltrek's arena. The Grogan planetary spokesman stood in the center ring, towering above even the largest alien diplomats, his cobalt-scaled armor gleaming under the chamber's starlit glow. A subtle murmur rolled across the assembly as more delegations arrived. The Council of Akora, eel-like beings that hovered in suspension fields, glided to their sector. The Trelvari, with their insectile carapaces and emerald compound eyes, clacked their mandibles softly in what Brian had learned was a greeting. Even the distant, reclusive Ilsavari were present, their pale humanoid faces hidden beneath ceremonial masks that shimmered like liquid silver. Above it all, suspended in the air by antigrav nodes, the Federation seal rotated slowly. A star cluster, encircled by 13 intertwined lines, each representing a founding species. Today, the question was whether that seal would gain a 14th. The stakes. Earth's delegation was small, President Michael Hurlburt, Caltrek as Earth's sponsor, 2 legal envoys from the Grogan Judicial Council, and Brian as the military witness. Their task was straightforward on paper: prove that Earth had achieved enough unity, discipline, and mutual defense capability to join the Federation of Planets. In reality, it was anything but simple. The Federation wasn't a charity. Membership granted access to interstellar trade, defensive treaties, and the immense weight of galactic law. But it also meant scrutiny, oversight, and the loss of certain sovereign freedoms. Some Earth territories saw membership as salvation, others saw it as surrender. Brian could feel the undercurrent of politics even here, in this vaulted chamber thousands of light-years from Earth. He knew that while the Federation debated, factions back home were already working to influence, or sabotage, the outcome, the call to order. A deep, resonant chime echoed through the chamber, vibrating in Brian's chest. The presiding speaker, a tall, feather-crested Tarexi, raised one long-fingered hand. This convocation of the Federation Council will hear the petition of the Terran homeworld for membership. Sponsorship is held by Caltrek of Grogan Prime. Delegates, your questions will be heard after initial statements. The floor lights shifted to a warm gold, centering on Caltrek. The Grogan stepped forward, his voice a low, deliberate rumble that carried without amplification. Honored Council, 8 standard cycles ago, I came upon a small blue world whose people were divided, not by distance, but by will. They fought themselves more than they defended themselves. Yet in less than a single galactic decade, they have accomplished what many worlds could not in centuries. They stand as one people now, bound by a shared law and a shared oath to defend one another. They are not perfect, no world is, but they are ready to stand among us as equals. The hall was silent for a beat, the kind of silence that was not necessarily agreement, but acknowledgement. Brian scanned the crowd. Some nodded, or their species equivalent. Others sat motionless, their eyes calculating, and somewhere in the shadows of the upper tiers, he thought he saw movement, a flicker of something metallic. But before he could focus, the presiding speaker called for the first round of responses. The trial of Earth had begun. Internal political sabotage. While the Federation's Grand Chamber debated the fate of Earth, the planet itself was a pressure cooker. Back home, the newly formed United Earth Territories Council was in session in New Geneva, the shining administrative capital of the unified government. The city's polished steel towers and sunlit plazas masked the reality that not everyone had accepted the new order. In one corner of the council's lower wing, a secure meeting room buzzed with encrypted comm signals. The meeting was classified as Resource Allocation Review, but in truth, it was the gathering place for a small but influential bloc of anti-Federation hardliners. The opposition moves. Governor Soren Tate of the Mid-Atlantic Territory leaned across the table, his voice low and sharp. Once we join the Federation, it's over. They'll have veto power over defense, over trade, over who we call an ally. We'll be a puppet government in all but name. Councillor Nadira Vance, representing the Central African Territory, tapped a finger against her datapad, projecting a holomap of Federation-controlled space. They're offering US security, Soren. You think the rogue miners, the smuggler syndicates, or whatever's out there beyond Grogan space is going to just leave us alone? They'll come, and without the Federation, we'll stand alone. Tate's expression hardened. We stood alone before, and we survived. I'd rather face a fight than hand over Earth's sovereignty to a council of alien bureaucrats. Around the table, several heads nodded, enough to make Brian's gut twist when he'd read the eventual intel report. These weren't fringe radicals. These were governors, ministers, and corporate magnates with the power to influence policy, and they had already begun laying groundwork to derail the Federation vote. The hidden hand. In the weeks leading up to the trial, the opposition bloc quietly redirected funds, slowing the production of Earth's next-generation warp-capable patrol ships. They seeded public forums with carefully phrased talking points, sowing doubts about the Federation's intentions. And more dangerously, they leaked fragments of classified Grogan intelligence reports, hinting, without proof, that some Federation member worlds had covertly supported the rogue miners. It wasn't true, at least not in the form they presented it, but truth mattered less than perception. By the time President Herbert's shuttle docked with Clintar Spire, polls on Earth had shifted by 9 points against Federation membership. The signal intercept. Caltrek's aide, a sharp-eyed Grogan named Vel Torren, intercepted a burst transmission while Brian was still reviewing tactical readiness reports in the Spire's human quarters. The signal was encoded with a civilian government encryption, not military, and was addressed to an unregistered relay station somewhere in the outer Gliese system. When they decrypted the message, the text was short but damning. If the vote looks favorable, the demonstration proceeds. Brian didn't like the sound of demonstration. Neither did Caltrek when he read it. Earth politics, the Grogan rumbled, is like swimming in a pool of knives. You survive, but you bleed. Brian didn't argue. He'd seen enough sabotage in the mining program's early days to know what human ambition could do when it felt threatened. But here, with the galaxy watching, one ill-timed demonstration could destroy everything Earth had worked for. Caltrek's defense of Earth. The Assembly Hall's sound dampeners kicked in as the presiding speaker called for the sponsor's formal defense. The ambient murmur of hundreds of alien delegates faded into a tense, weighty silence. Caltrek stepped into the center ring again, the translucent holoscreen wrapping around him in a slow, orbiting arc. It displayed Earth's history in images, data streams and holovids, from the grainy black and white flicker of the first moon landing to the shimmering Alcubierre Drive tests above Mars. The opening statement. Honored worlds of the Federation, Caltrek began, his voice low but resonant. I know the question before you is not whether humans exist. You have seen them, met them, fought beside them. The question is whether they can rise above the divisions that shape their past and embrace a shared future. The holo shifted to stark images. The burning oil fields of the Middle East, mushroom clouds from 20th century tests, and the digital chaos of the 21st cyber wars. Gasps and murmurs echoed from the delegates. For many, these images were their first glimpse into the raw brutality of human history. But Caltrek continued, judge not only their scars. Judge the distance they have traveled from them. The display morphed into the Unity Accord signing, leaders from every former nation-state placing their hands on the new Earth Constitution. Then footage of the Gliese mining operation. Humans and ex-convicts alike working side by side under a violet alien sky. The cross-examination. The Council of Akora floated forward in their grav pods. Grogan delegate, you say they are ready, yet they mandate every citizen carry a weapon. Does this not signal mistrust? A world arming itself is often a world preparing for war. Caltrek's answer was immediate. On Earth, the concept is older than your oceans. Self-defense is not a declaration of war. In fact, in a young world where law has not yet fully matured, it is a stabilizing force. Their law binds the weapon to the law itself. A soft wave of data shimmered above him, statistics showing a decline in violent crime since the firearm mandates enforcement. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Brian's role. When the presiding speaker allowed witnesses, Caltrek gestured to Brian. This is Commander Brian Baugh, Planetary Defense Coordinator for Gliese 667C. He has led men and women, free and imprisoned, under the most hostile conditions in this sector. He has seen Earth's people rise to meet not only their own challenges, but threats from beyond their world. Brian took the floor, boots echoing on the metallic platform. He wasn't a speechmaker, but he didn't need to be. We've bled together, he said simply. Miners, Marines, engineers. Some of the best men and women I've served with started their tour in chains. Now they're free. And if that doesn't tell you what Earth is capable of, nothing will the impact. When Brian stepped back, Caltrek locked eyes, or the Grogan equivalent, with several undecided delegates. The weight of his presence filled the chamber. You are cautious, as you must be. But if you deny them today, you may never see the Earth that could be. They are not perfect, but they are ready enough to grow with us, rather than apart from us. The hall remained silent for several long heartbeats. In Federation politics, silence meant calculation, and calculation meant the outcome was still in play. The surprise attack. The presiding speaker was mid-sentence when the first alarm cut through the chamber. A deep, thrumming tone, one that bypassed language entirely and triggered an instinctive tightening in every muscle. Above the assembly hall, the Clintar Spire's defense grid shifted from passive scan to active targeting. The threat appears. Veltoran's voice came over Brian's comlink. Unregistered vessel, inbound vector, accelerating to weapons range. Not in Federation registry, Caltrek's crest spines lifted in a way Brian had learned, meant barely concealed fury. The Grogan looked toward the presiding speaker. This trial is not over, he said. But the enemy has chosen to test Earth today. The main view screen bloomed to life. The incoming vessel was sleek, predatory, and twice the size of a Grogan battlecruiser. Its hull was matte black, with streaks of dull red, like dried blood in vacuum. Energy signatures pulsed along its spine, charging weapons that outclassed most of Earth's arsenal by decades. Scramble orders. President Hurlbut didn't wait for protocol. USSF Resolute all-intercept craft. Launch. Full combat authorization. From their orbiting docks, Grogan interceptors deployed alongside Earth's ships. A mix of needle-like strike craft and heavier atmospheric-capable gunships. Brian was already in motion toward the human tactical bay, barking orders to the Marine detachment stationed as ceremonial guards for the trial. "Ceremonial's over," he growled. "Gear up, the joint defense." The alien ship's first salvo wasn't aimed at the spire itself. It targeted the outer Gliese asteroid belt, detonating a cluster of mines and sending debris scattering. A warning shot, but one with teeth. Grogan's strike craft flanked the Resolute, their drives flaring in sharp bursts as they weaved through the debris field. Federation protocols might forbid unsanctioned warfare, but this was self-defense, and the Spire's AI had already broadcast a defensive engagement clearance to all ships in range. Brian's squad boarded a Grogan dropship, riding hard toward a boarding vector. "Caltrek," Brian said over the secure channel, "tell the chamber this isn't an Earth fight. It's ours, it will be both," the Grogan replied, "and they will see you bleed for this world," turning the tide. The alien ship's shields were formidable, but Grogan-Earth joint tactics proved faster. While Grogan gunners hammered the forward emitters, Earth's interceptors dove in close, pelting weak points with concentrated railgun bursts. Brian's dropship cut through the residual shielding and latched on with mag clamps. Inside, the boarding action was fast and brutal. The attackers were lean, grey-skinned bipeds with segmented armor and shock blades that could shear through standard plating. But they hadn't expected resistance from both humans and Grogans fighting as one. By the time Brian's Marines secured the primary reactor core, the alien captain signaled surrender. Aftermath in the hall. When Brian and Caltrek returned to the assembly hall, still armored and streaked with grime, the chamber erupted, not in chaos, but in a standing ovation. The presiding speaker's voice carried over the clamor. Today, they fought as Federation. Today, they proved readiness in blood and unity. Let the vote commence. Brian caught the faintest smirk from Caltrek. "You bled well," the Grogan said. "Yeah," Brian replied. "Let's hope it was worth it." Epilogue. One step further. The vote was unanimous, though not without hesitation. In the Federation Council's central chamber, the presiding speaker's voice carried like a stone skipping over still water. By consensus of 1,027 member worlds, Earth is hereby granted provisional membership in the Federation of Planets. Probationary period, 20 galactic cycles. Terms: maintain planetary unity, uphold interstellar law, contribute to mutual defense. A muted roar filled the vast chamber. Some delegations applauded. Others simply inclined their heads, expressions unreadable in alien physiognomy. For the humans present, President Hurlbut, Ian Lusk, the United Earth delegation, the sound was victory. For Brian Baugh, standing off to one side in his formal black and silver uniform, it felt more like the slow turning of a massive lock, a new banner. Back on Earth, the announcement was broadcast to every territory. Flags no longer flew as symbols of division, but as emblems of heritage beneath a new crest, a white star, surrounded by a ring of deep blue, meant to represent Earth's entry into a wider circle. Factories switched production lines from warships to joint research vessels. Universities added Federation language courses to their curriculums. In the streets of Lagos, New Chicago, Mumbai, and Shanghai, citizens carried firearms on their hips beside translation devices. The world had shifted, and no one was pretending it hadn't. But in quiet rooms, politicians still whispered about power. Corporations quietly charted the economics of alien trade. And the black market arms pipeline hadn't vanished. It had simply gone deeper underground, returned to Gliese. Weeks later, Brian returned to Gliese 667C. The shuttle descended over the mining colony, its lights casting long shadows over the silvered terrain. The infrastructure was thriving now. Armored supply convoys, efficient domed habitats, and even the faint buzz of laughter from the wreck decks. He stepped out into the thin alien air, looking up at the sky. Out here, the stars weren't the same as Earth's constellations. They seemed sharper, closer, as if leaning in to study the newcomers who had joined their ancient network. Cal Trek's voice came from behind him. "You've done what I thought impossible. You've made them see the same future." Brian gave a short nod. "Future's the easy part. It's living through it that's hard." The Grogan chuckled, a deep, resonant sound. "Then let us live through it together," the final thought. Brian turned his gaze upward again. Somewhere beyond those stars were allies. Somewhere beyond them were predators. Earth was no longer invisible, no longer insignificant. He felt both the weight and the thrill of it pressing down on him like gravity. The galaxy had noticed Earth, and it would never look away again. Author's note: every great leap forward begins with a single act of courage. Gliese Rising was born from the question that's haunted humanity for centuries. What happens the day we learn we're not alone? It's a story of ambition, unity, and the cost of stepping onto the galactic stage before we're truly ready. If this journey through alien skies and uncharted worlds moved you, I ask you to help keep it alive. Subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter of humanity's story. Like to let me know it resonated, and share it so others can join us among the stars. The galaxy has noticed Earth, and together we'll make sure it never looks away. Brian M. Brumbaugh.